watching live, checking us out on YouTube, or listening on your favorite podcast provider, you're most definitely my people. Welcome to another episode of Botched, and Share Shots. We still have high hopes of delivering quality wrestling content, and if not, we'll sprinkle in hosts from other podcasts, so we still get over. I'm your host, a chef by trade and a mark by choice. I am the Will Gray, and I'm glad to be here on this journey. And tonight the journey is we're going to talk about the three faces of Foley. Joining me is the founder of the Geeks and Noob Network, host of the Geeks and Noob podcast, one of the hosts on the crazy popular Panda Wrestling Company, the one, the only, Super Beard Vince Hoover. Vince, what's up, man? How are you? Thanks for coming on and chat about some wrestling, bro.
I'm having a fun. I have a soundboard, so I have way too much fun on this. But I'm so happy that you let me on. This looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I look forward to it.
I'm glad you're here, my friend. Joining me, as always, is a man who comes with his own disclaimer, and that is the opinions of the Yellow Shoe Guy are his and your own, and do not reflect those of Botched, and Share Shots or the Rivet City Radio Podcast Network. Bobby Mag, how are you?
I'm doing well. I'm excited about talking about Foley. Like, it kind of reminds me of just this crazy paradox with him. Almost like if Pinocchio ever said, "My nose will grow now."
I don't understand anything you say most of the time. But perched upon her iron throne, as always, she is the Beyonce to my Hova. She is the Bonnie to my Clyde. She is the brains behind the operation. She is the boss bitch, Miss Allison Siegel. Al, how are you?
I'm good. Glad to not be bored after, a mediocre Super Bowl.
It wasn't mediocre.
I thought, okay, the parts I watched and cared about, the commercials were mediocre.
It was okay-ish. Okay, before we get going, there's a few housekeeping notes I need to announce, because we do those kinds of things now. This coming week, Tuesday, Valentine's Day, 2/14/23, I will be hosting as a guest host on the Putting You Over Network in place of standing streamer. Him and the fam are taking some time off, so you can find me over there on Tuesday. I will be interviewing independent superstar Vinny Pacifico at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then on Thursday, we're taking trivia on the road. We will also be doing trivia on Thursday night on the Putting You Over Network on Thursday night. That one will be after the World Elite stream ends. So 8:45, 9 o'clock, we'll hit trivia on Thursday night over on Putting You Over. So we've got those two things to talk about. I have to plug the website. Go to botchpotsandchairshots.com. Leave a 5-star review. Give us a comment. Tell us how great we are, how terrible we sound. Either way, it helps the algorithm. But, straight to business. Super Beard Vince, this is your first time on the show. I'm going to ask you this question. I always ask it the first. It's always the way we lead it off, kind of our icebreaker. What has you pissed off for greatness this week in the world of professional wrestling? What kind of has you the most worked up this week? It could be anything. Gear, a match, an entire fucking promotion, a whole card. What has you worked up this week more than anything?
This is too easy of an answer, because if anybody happened to watch our first full episode of Friday Night Fight Night this past week, we've added Rampage to our SmackDown watch-along, revamped the show, did a whole thing. So we watched Rampage this past week, right? Show's going great, having a fun time, great episode. And then suddenly the Acclaimed got thrown into the best friend Jarrett Lethal feud for some reason, even though they just... First off, them losing the tag titles on Dynamite pissed me off, because it was just stupid. Hey, the hottest thing we have going in the entire fucking federation, let's take the belts off them for no reason whatsoever and put it on the Ass Boys. And then we're going to stick them in a feud they don't belong in for no apparent reason whatsoever. If anybody wants to go back and either on the PWC Twitch or on the Geeks and Noobs Twitch or even on my YouTube, TGN Networks, go watch the last 10 minutes or so of the episode. Not the end stream screen, because I accidentally left that running for 10 minutes. So go 20 minutes back. And just watch my face and everybody else react to the Acclaim coming out and getting involved in that, because this is Tony Khan, Mr. 2-time Booker of the Year, and it was one of the worst bookings I've seen in a whole week. Just between Wednesday and then Friday, it was awful. So yeah, that's a very easy pick for me.
I didn't necessarily disagree with the I don't disagree with the Ass Boys being transition champions if it leads to FTR getting the belts and then getting an FTR acclaimed feud. Because we know if with the Ass Boys having the belts, if FTR shows back up on AEW TV, they're already primed and ready to go for a feud. But that's a big if, because the contracts are still up in the air.
Well, here's the thing. They said that they were taking time off in April, and then they would make their decision on whether they get a new contract with AEW or go somewhere else. Wink, wink. And that would be the last contract they sign.
They're my favorite.
It's been heavily rumored that they're Triple H boys and that they're talking about going back. But even if they do go back to AEW, they're not coming back until April. Like, that was their official announcement. Dax Hardwood announced that on his podcast, that they are taking off until April and will not wrestle again until April. So you mean to tell me that on a random Dynamite episode, you're going to have the Ass Boys beat the Acclaimed, your hottest commodity in all of your promotion right now besides MJF, and then make them hold the titles till April? That doesn't make any sense. Also, versus FTR is a much better match than the Ass Boys versus FTR, hands down. Like, no offense to those guys, but hands down, much, much better match. Period. So, and you don't have to have a heel in that feud because they're gonna just take jabs at each other. So yeah, I feel it was an incredibly stupid decision. And in fact, as they like to say,
that is one big pile of shit.
One big pile of shit.
Thank you, Jeff Goldblum.
Mr. Shoe Guy, what has you pissed off for greatness?
I just think Triple H has got to be feeling buyer's remorse at this point. Like, all these people that he brought back, I don't know, they're not doing it for me, and I just can't see that they're doing it for a lot of other people. Chelsea Green, one of them, just, I don't know, like, they made her lose in the Royal Rumble, like, within, like, 30 seconds. Then they bring in, 10.
8.
Yeah, so,
it was 8.
Okay, so just so you guys know, my exaggeration was, how you normally talk to a woman. I'd be like, yeah, that was the best, 30 seconds of your life, and reality. But yeah, like, he's got to be having buyer's remorse. Like, there's all these people that he brought back, like Karrion Kross, for instance, as well. Like, they're not getting over the way that, I don't know. I think it's proving that WWE had the right to terminate them when they did. And I think he wasted a lot of money bringing them all back, putting them all back under contract. And I think that if Vince is going to take back over, that I think he'd be justified to get rid of them all again.
Do you think that Triple H is running into... I've used this as a critique towards the other guys. Do you think Triple H scooped up a lot of these loose talents that were kind of playing free agent for a while after they got released, and now Triple H has an inflated roster in Connecticut and he might be running out of TV time for all of them?
Well, yeah, because none of them have personality. Like, even a guy like, you give him a name like Madcap Moss. One, the thing that they tried to develop under Vince McMahon with him was terrible. And now it's even worse that he's still called Madcap Moss, and he's just coming out there, and he's now the number one contender to, like, the Intercontinental Championship. Like, do I have any, like, thought that Gunther is going to lose to him? Like, no. Like, there's no chance. So, I don't know. I think Triple H, he's putting the cart before the horse. He, developed all these guys in NXT, and once Dusty Rhodes passed away, the personality levels stopped. And that class that came before the Garganos and stuff like that, great personalities and are still getting over, where this Gargano class and these other guys coming in, and even, again, that's why they were fired in the first place. And Karrion Kross was obvious.
Super Beard, do you think there's an issue with the roster size versus the amount of TV time? Do you think that's one of the reasons, using Karrion Kross as an example since Bobby brought him up, do you think the correlation with people getting over with the crowds correlates with the amount of time they have on the TV screen? You're muted, Bubba.
I must have hit the button. I don't think it's quite the same as what Tony has. Tony has filled his toy chest of action figures to 10 times capacity. Whereas with Triple H, yeah, he brought a few people back, but he's not hired anywhere near the same amount of people that Tony Khan scooped up. The reality is, Karrion Kross came into NXT after Dusty passed away, and he was over. Came to the main roster, and Vince butchered his gimmick. Now that he's been brought back, unfortunately, they're trying... For some reason, Triple H has decided instead of taking him back to what he was at NXT, they were going to try to let him evolve again. Sometimes, it's always great, and Chris Jericho is the perfect example of it's always great to evolve. Most of the time. There are exceptions to that, and one of those exceptions is a guy like Karrion Kross. He needs to go back to that killer that he was at NXT. Shave the head again, just the killer Karrion Kross we had in NXT, and he'll get over. I think the problem with, like, say, Gargano and them, it's not so much TV time, it's getting stuck in a feud with the Miz. Like, Miz has become the gatekeeper, but it doesn't always work. And it didn't work here. But as they're rebuilding the way, in a way, it's gonna start to get over. Johnny still has such phenomenal matches that people love him. Dexter is still an over character, never having to say a word. I think there's a couple others, like the return of Tegan Knox. She's got to get placed somewhere. I think the problem is not the amount of people. It's the amount of people in a short amount of time that he brought back. If he just spaced them out a little bit more and let them each develop as they came in, they wouldn't be as lost. That's something that a new booker who's never actually done it before, except for in NXT, which was just a little taste of it, is learning. He brought too many people back in a short amount of time. If he'd have spread those out a little bit more, he would have had time to develop each one and really be more hands-on with them. And he made a joke about it on the 30th anniversary of Raw. He's like, this booking stuff is hard. That's a work shoot. Like, that was a work shoot. Because it's hard. It's harder than he thought, running a whole billion-dollar company on the creative and talent. He's also doing talent relations. He's not just... I think my camera froze, and this happens on Zoom, so I apologize. I will fix that shortly.
You're good. We can still hear you, so you can keep talking while you fix it if you want to.
With a dumbass look on my face.
It's a great look.
Yeah. Absolutely, like, he's doing, I think he's doing a phenomenal job. And I think that I think he tried too much too soon. And we'll go with this shitty camera for right now while I fix the other one. But yeah, he's trying too much too soon. And once he, like, gets through Mania and everything and kind of realizes what he's done, I think after Mania you're going to see a focus on those people. Because one thing that happened, yes, was I weirded out by Mad Cass Moss winning that? Absolutely. But I think that was literally just to give Gunther another pinfall. I thought Santos Escobar was going to win that, but if you saw that WWE exclusive of him and Rey Mysterio exchanging masks, you just pushed Santos to another level. So, Karrion Kross needs to go away for like a month, shave the head, go back to the killer gimmick. They need to stop using Rey so much whenever there's some kind of, like, we need a contenders match. Throw Rey in there.
Ray, I feel like Ray is almost not an equal in the ring, but him and Miz share the same title.
Yeah, he's kind of SmackDown's gatekeeper now.
Yep. And the Gargano thing, I had to check my TV at the Royal Rumble. I thought I hit mute. When he came out, dude, the crowd was dead.
All right, Miss Eagle, it's your turn. What has you pissed off for greatness?
I said this the other night when we were on Smacking It Raw. I'm happy and pissed about something. So I am happy that Mark Briscoe is on AEW TV. I am pissed that it took his brother dying for that to happen. Like, it is shameful.
I don't really think there's a whole lot we can say to that, really.
No.
I mean, that's pretty straightforward.
Yep, dead on. I actually said those almost exact same words when we saw it live on the other night. We're like, it sucks that it took his brother dying for him to get here, but I'm glad he's here.
Yeah.
And then the thing is, like, we see how great
What did you say about me?
he did with Mark Sterling and then Woods and setting up that match. That promo segment was perfect. It was great. A little bit of goofy wrestling with some serious backstory. Boom. Casual fans are locked in. Hardcore fans are locked in. Like, and it just showed, like, why was he not here before?
Yeah.
Bobby, what you guys say?
I was actually the complete opposite. I thought the promo started off strong, but then I thought as it went on, I thought the Mark was terrible.
What about it didn't you like, though?
Why he wasn't on TV.
Was it just a style thing, though? Did you just not like that? The style of promo that the Briscoes do? Because that was pretty spot on for what they've done in the past. That sounded like a Briscoes promo.
I felt like he was pretending to be a Briscoe. I didn't feel... I don't know. I felt like his other promos prior to this national television debut, I really felt like those were more honest and like heart driven. I almost felt like he was almost like WWE'd, like fed what he was supposed to say and just didn't deliver as well as he normally would. It came from the heart, brother.
Giving what's happened in his life, I mean, I can understand like how, you know, stepping back into the ring so quickly might be a little difficult. He might not be 100% on. You know, it's his first real promo without his brother. So I'm sure it was emotional and lots of other things. So
yeah, but Charlie Haas had to do the same thing, and so did Wild Bill Irwin when their wrestling brothers, you know, legitimately passed away, and they both did have good pushes after their brothers passed away as well. So, you know, it's unfortunate. You know, I'm not being mean or anything about the Briscoes. I don't know. I just felt like Mark wasn't Mark Briscoe, and maybe again, like you said, Allison, maybe it's just going to take him a little bit of time to you know, find that happy spot in pro wrestling again. Because I'm sure every time he sees a ring or a locker room, he sees his brother.
yeah.
Well, also the thing with that is Mark was not always the mouthpiece. It was mainly Jay. Jay was mainly the mouthpiece. Also, they had no filter wherever they were because they weren't on TV. So Mark, I know between the emotion of being there, the emotional locker room, everybody in that locker room was like, "Hey, man," you know, they were probably still being very like supportive, but in a kind of almost down kind of way. Like it was kind of enough to like make him emotional. And then he also had to go in there with the mindset that now it's all on me, and I've got to watch my mouth, so that I don't say something that's going to get me fired. So that first promo, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I still thought it was great. I still loved it. It's a mix of goofy wrestling and serious wrestling. And if it's the same kind of slight stutter step, say a month from now, of him constantly being on TV, then maybe I'll be like, okay, maybe he's not ready for TV. But in that first one, I'm gonna give him a lot. He's gonna have a lot of leeway with me as far as that goes, because like in Charlie Haas's case and the other ones, that was a big loss for them. And this is going to sound really bad, but fuck it, whatever. You can put your whole disclaimer that my views don't represent anything. Jay Briscoe, the loss of Jay Briscoe is a much harder hit on the entire industry as of today than those deaths were back then. Jay Briscoe, the Briscoe brothers, if anybody who didn't know, go back and watch them. They are what should define tag team wrestling. And the fact that Kofi Kingston, who never worked with them, never shared a locker with them, watched every single thing they did and modeled himself after them as much as he could, tells you so much. The Briscoes really were the definition of tag team wrestling in the modern era. They are the blueprint. And Jay's loss in such a horrific way, out of nowhere, I think it just shook everybody to their core. It reminded me of Eddie Guerrero's death. I remember exactly where I was when I heard the news that Eddie Guerrero died. I will always remember exactly where I was. Granted, I was on the show, so it's on video, so it'll be immortal as well, when I found out that Jay Briscoe died. And it's kind of that kind of impact. I shared a locker room with Jay Briscoe. I got to have a locker room experience with the Briscoes. I didn't work a match with them, but I got to share a locker room with them. And those guys were the sweetest human beings, Jay especially. They made sure they talked to everyone. I've also shared a locker room with CM Punk, and he's the exact opposite. Biggest egotistical asshole I've ever met, and this was before he ever signed with WWE. Biggest piece of shit ever. The Briscoes, exact opposite. They made sure to talk to everybody. They asked us, do you guys have any questions for us? Do you need any help with anything? Do you want us to work over your match with you? I'm like, oh, I'm doing a Battle Royal. He's like, well, what number are you going in? What number are you going out? Like, they asked me, like, they were really super cool people. And so that loss, it did also hit me personally. So I think with a slight personal tinge, I'm even going to give Mark more leeway than most. But I think everybody's going to have to understand that. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional. I apologize. I think that we're going to have to give Mark a little extra leash on that dog collar. We'll have to give him a little extra leash, at least for a few weeks, as he acclimates to a style they've never done, really.
Did you guys? So am I the only one that caught this? I'm not talking. When Mark had that match, his first match with Lethal, Jericho and his group, they weren't on the stage, and I also noticed that the Bucks almost seemed like they were like forced into clapping. Like, I know they were the front of it, but of course the Bucks want to be on front camera. I just felt like, I don't know, like to me, I don't know, it just felt disingenuous from the Bucks as compared to the other people. But the other part that really grabbed me was I never saw Jericho and his group on the stage during that time.
I can't speak for anybody personally, obviously, but I do know on being the Elite, and both of them have spoke out about their personal relationships because they feuded with the Briscoes and had barn burners in the IWGP, in New Japan Pro Wrestling for the IWGP tag titles, the 6-man titles versus the Elite. Then they had feuds in Ring of Honor. They had feuds like in and out of the Indies, PWG. I've heard Matt and Nick Jackson. I'm not a Young Bucks guy, but I know they spoke directly on their relationships with the Briscoes, and they came through as those indie darlings together in a lot of ways, and the Briscoes just never got that rub to that next level. And I don't necessarily know if they wanted it. They were happy being those road dogs, and I agree 1,000% with Super Beard. I've had a chance to meet Jay on 2 different occasions. I got to meet him as recently as last July at Supercast. We got to watch him work against the Rock and Roll Express at their last match in Dalton Arena. So we've had some. I've followed them for multiple years, so it was huge for me without even having the relationship of working in the same locker room. That's just from a bird's eye perspective of somebody who knew the man personally and watched him work. I couldn't imagine what it was like to share the locker room with him at the same time, because that's a totally different level of respect for him then. You know?
My interpretation of the Bucks is that they they work with people, but it's not like Midnight and Rock and Roll, like where they developed a personal relationship, or these other like historical tag teams that have feuds. I don't know. My interpretation of the Bucks are they don't really care about the other person as long as they get over.
Well, the Bucks, it may have just been a moment where they, were tired or whatever, because it was at the end of, a huge, like, they had a match, like, not long before that. But, like, they wore Jay, like, armbands for, 2 weeks? I think they may even still be wearing them. So, yeah, so I think, like, I wouldn't really take into account, like, what they looked like during that moment. I mean, it's the end of the show. It's super emotional. You know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't read too much into it.
Yeah, maybe I read into it wrong, and obviously I'm not fans of them either, so...
Also, yeah. I think Daniel, I don't quote me on this, I'll have to go back and watch, but I think Daniel Garcia was at least out there. I thought I remember seeing him in the back of the crowd of people.
And I'm not sure Jericho was there that day.
I think he was the first match, wasn't he? Like, I feel like he wrestled on that show.
I know that, like, when was the cruise? Was that like the week before the cruise or the week of the cruise? I can't remember.
It was like 2 weeks before, I think.
Okay. I don't know. He may have already left the arena at the time. I mean, who knows?
Yeah, but I felt like that would be like a show of disrespect, if you got I don't know. And again, I just know Jericho's a guy that you would definitely spot in the
Right.
crowd, and
Yeah.
I didn't spot him in the crowd, and I just
I
felt
mean,
like
MJF wasn't out there.
I think, and that one is actually like because I'm pretty sure MJF has worked with them, but I think a lot of it what it was is it was mainly Ring of Honor guys.
Yeah.
It was mainly Ring of Honor guys that had worked Ring of Honor. I don't think Chris Jericho. He might have had 1 or 2 matches in Ring of Honor, but I don't really think he had much to
he
do
was
with
their
it.
champ.
Prior to that, though, he didn't have a history with Ring of Honor. You smartass.
Yep. Still only had a couple matches. Like he only had a couple matches.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. Yeah, they gave him the title because it's Chris Jericho. If he comes in, you're gonna do that. But he didn't have a history with Ring of Honor. Is what I'm saying. Like he didn't have time with the Briscoes as much. You know, he was spending most of his time in WWE. So maybe they felt like maybe certain people just felt like it wasn't right for them to come out to maybe hog the spotlight because, like you said, Chris Jericho would get spotted out of the crowd. He's like, let the guys that spent decades with these boys in the locker room, let them have their moment. Let them have their hugs. It's going to be emotional. And like I said, it was mainly Ring of Honor stalwarts that were on that stage. And the Young Bucks were probably, like Ali said, were probably just emotionally drained as well as physically beaten up because they went through a hell of a match. And I'm not a Young Bucks fan either. I'm right there with you. But I think that in that case, they were just probably emotionally drained and probably hated the fact that they had to be out front because Tony probably told them to go out front. Hey, your EVPs, be out front. You know, like, they may have wanted to stay in the back or something. Like, they didn't want to, so they may have not been happy about where they were. But also, it could have been like, hey, we're going to move up front because we are who we are. That's very much a possibility. I wouldn't doubt that in a second. I just think that it was just in a very emotional, because, I mean, that match was what? How many days after he passed? Days after it was days.
Mm-hmm.
Like 11 days, I think. Yeah, and then, but like the rebuttal to that, and not even a rebuttal, but how many guys worked with the Ultimate Warrior in WWF or E that were standing on that stage when after he passed away? And I don't know. Maybe I'm just used to the way WWF or E does their memorials. Everybody's out there. Vince is obviously in the middle. Triple H and Steph is out front if they're there. I don't know. I don't know. I just felt like it wasn't as big. I just didn't feel like as big as the AEW locker room is. It just didn't seem like everybody was out there.
Well, c'est la vie. My pissed off for greatness this week is super simple. I had a really easy wrestling week. I'm just mad that we had to push the show back 2 hours for a very mediocre Super Bowl. Miss Siegel, I'm going to send it up to you now. News and rumors. What you got for us this evening?
My first one is Randy Orton is rumored to be making a return. He's been seen doing charity events. A gear maker, whether this is true or not, has said that Randy has put in to have boots made. My only thing about that, and Will, you and I talked about this, is that I feel like anybody who's legitimately making gear for Randy Orton would be required to have some sort of NDA. And this dude. But I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I believe this guy. That he's the one making Randy's boots. Because it's like.
Yeah, but you don't a lot of guys that make gear are actually in the biz and they work on the indies.
Right, we know that. I mean, I know. We have a friend that does gear for a lot of top people, and he said most of the time he's asked specifically not to say anything. Not necessarily is he asked to sign an NDA, but he is specifically asked to not say anything. And I think somebody making gear for Randy would be told not to say anything. I don't know.
Here's the thing about that. It's not an officially signed NDA. It's a respect of the business kind of thing about it. Also, Randy did an interview right before he left with injury. I believe it was with Brian Statner. It might have been somebody else. He talked about his gear maker, including his boots. It's a woman. He's had the same person making his gear for over 20 years. So where did this guy come from?
Yeah.
And the fact that, if you've been working, Randy Orton doesn't just go randomly find a new person. Because the fact is, WWE has boot makers. They have gear makers. He would just go through them.
If he didn't already have a privatized person, he would just use the company, right?
Exactly. And so why would he just go to this new guy who's nobody's ever heard of? Nobody's ever heard of him making his gear. And then he's going to just... And this person, who's a gear maker, who supposedly understands the business, is just going to go out there and call somebody and let them know, hey, let me give you an inside scoop. What does he get out of it? Nothing, really. Just all he did was get his name out there. I think it's a bullshit story. Now, the thing that is legitimate is his workout videos, is his charity appearances, because that's all filmed.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a possibility. But I don't think we're going to see him back as soon as they're saying because of this gear guy. I think that's where it gets blown way out of proportion, and it's just somebody looking for clout.
I know what she's talking about because it was reported by Sportskeeda. They were the first people that leaked it out. When I looked into the dude's Instagram story, that's when I messaged our buddy that makes gear, and I was like, what do you think about this as you have this kind of stuff happen regularly with him? But go ahead, Bobby. I didn't mean to cut you off, sir. That was my fault.
No. I don't I guess they exposed the guy's name, the gear maker?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was whole ass on there. I can send you the article. There was a tweet of it in our group chat and stuff on one of the tweeters. But Sportskeeda originally reported it. But I kind of thought the same thing. Like, he wouldn't just randomly attach himself to some new guy. Because, once again, Randy's one of those guys. Like, if he's going to have gear made, he's probably, like you said, had the same gear maker his entire time since he's been in OVW. Like, or pretty fucking close to it, at least.
Yeah, with the possibility of him coming back, though, I think this might be the biggest evolution, no pun intended, of Randy Orton. Because he's not going to be able to do that RKO with a bad back.
No.
Like, he's going to have to work a different style. And that'll be really interesting for Randy Orton because since day one, other than some new tattoos and whether your hair is long or short, Randy Orton hasn't changed much.
Superbeard, do you think this says anything about his career, though? If he's successful using the same equation over time?
I think it says a lot about his career. He's a 14-time world champion, second only to John Cena and Ric Flair. And in WWE, he's second only to John Cena. I thought about it. I remember, like, he started doing this when him and Edge started doing those promos, when Edge returned, and I'm like, my God, these are phenomenal. Like, these should be used to teach at promo class. These are great. And then I'm like, I remember him talking. He's like, yeah, I just kind of figured out my promo style. It took me this long to figure it out. I'm all like, really? And I had to go back and watch some of his old promos. And I'm like, how'd this guy get over? Like, he wasn't good on the mic, but he was able to get over. And I think that while he worked, quote-unquote, the same style, he really did evolve over time, the character. And I equate that to John Cena, because John Cena had, a massive evolution of characters from Ruthless Aggression to Dr. Thugonomics to Never Give Up. Yet his style was the same. His ring style was the same. He didn't change his ring style. He didn't change his moveset. And he is the biggest WWE superstar behind Stone Cold. Like, I think he eclipses The Rock as far as because of longevity, 20 years in the ring. So you can evolve yourself without having to evolve your in-ring style. And honestly, as somebody who has trained and had, I wrestled for 4 years, evolving your work inside the ring is hard. Because you get into it, it becomes second nature. It's meant to become second nature. It's meant to become instinctual. And the fact that Randy Orton is arguably one of the best ring psychologists of the modern era, he's definitely on that Mount Rushmore when it comes to ring psychology. The man told a story in every single match he ever did without a single word said.
Yeah,
So,
he trained Jim Cornette. You had to. You had to.
Yeah, that OVW class was second to none. Like, you think, like, you want to talk about the greatest individual class to ever come out of any training school? John Cena, Randy Orton, Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, Batista. Like, it's ridiculous. Like, there's so many more out of that class that we don't even talk about that had
Easy money.
Yeah. So now he's going to have to, but don't forget, who is one of his greatest mentors? Ric Flair, right? somebody he still talks to, somebody he still works with. Ric Flair has had arguably the biggest change in ring style work ever after that plane crash and breaking his back. He had to completely evolve his style, yet if you watch his old stuff before the plane crash and the stuff after, it looks like he's still doing a lot of the same moves. But he evolved in the way he landed, in the way he took things, in the way he did things, and the restiveness he hit, like hitting the corner and flipping over, that kind of thing, like he changed the way he did that. Randy Orton, I think, can still do the RKO, but I think he's going to end up, it's going to probably cause him to have to get a hip replacement, depending on how long he wrestles, but I think he's going to end up, instead of him flat backing it, he's going to end up turning into it and maybe landing on his side, similar to like when Ric Flair takes the climbing on top rope, oh no, I'm getting slammed, he lands on his side. He doesn't land on his back.
He lands on his side and his hip. It's like, I don't know how he has not had a hip replacement the way he took those bumps. Like, he never did a flat back after the plane.
My 2 cents on the Orton thing before Allison gives us our next one is the guy we're going to spend a lot of the conversation about after this is Foley. Foley said a lot in a lot of interviews about how you learn the basics of how to bump, and then you kind of evolve your bump to match your style. Your body tells you what's comfortable. After you learn the basic mechanics of it, your individual bump changes. My bump from Bobby's bump to Super Beard's bump to Allison's bump would look different from all 4 of us once we got through the basics of, oh, we're back. You know, like once you get past the basics, you evolve it to make it comfortable for your body. And I think if Randy figures out a way to evolve it to where he can do the move comfortably for this new body, then I don't think he'll have to... Is he going to be doing it off the top rope through ladders out of nowhere? Maybe not. But I think still doing them safely in the ring, if he learns how to do them the right way, I don't think it'll affect him long term. We've had Shawn Michaels, multiple back surgeries, Edge. Some of these guys have came through with major debilitating surgeries and have modified enough of their game but still kept the core of what they do alive.
Yeah, you learn how to do it. Like, your body eventually, like, calluses. Like, it learns, how to take the move. And yeah, Flair's a big example. Foley, I think, is another example as he got older and did, and his weight, fluctuation as well. It's going to be interesting to see how Orton comes back because, Orton was never a big risk taker. I know he's been in some, high risk matches, but, obviously not like, Christian and Edge and the Hardys and stuff like that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how Orton comes back and, how, like what he does. Is he an elder statesman at this point? Like an Edge like type character. And what's his work schedule going to be? And this is probably the most excited I've wanted to see Randy Orton in a decade.
As long as they don't put him back with Riddle, I'm fine.
Yeah, not an RKO, bro.
Loved RK Bro. But again, I'm a big fan of goofy wrestling. And I think that that dichotomy of the two of them worked so well together. And it was an organic transition for Randy Orton to go from disgustingly conniving heel to babyface. It was organic as hell. The crowd loved him. They latched onto it, and as he put it, the most fun he's had his whole career. In shoot interviews, he talked about it was the most fun he's had his whole career. Riddle changes. He didn't like Riddle at first, which everybody who talks about Riddle, that's he rubs him the wrong way the first time they meet him. But that's because he's just who he is on TV is who he is. And so
banging corn cars and smoking pot.
Yeah.
I don't think there's anything wrong with that, though. Not the last half, at least.
I'd like to meet.
And Randy, like I said, he's had the most fun he's had in a long time. Like he equated it back to that time when in that very famous moment where he did that giant split toe touch in the match. Like he hadn't had fun since then, and now he was having fun again. He was smiling. He's like, I was close to retirement, and now I feel like I can go another 5-6 years. Now, obviously, the surgery has kind of curved that, and maybe it's dialed it down. But you're right. Like, he could work an Edge schedule or a Roman schedule, and be fine. And he could come back. If he doesn't come back to RK Bro, he can come back as the Viper, conniving, evil. Shows up to disrupt some stuff and then leaves for a bit. Shows up to disrupt some stuff and leaves for a bit. Like, there's a lot he can do. And pro wrestlers, I have to give them so much credit. Their bodies are so they're like rubber bands. They bounce back. Like, the fact that Edge is wrestling again, the fact that Daniel Bryan's wrestling again, the fact that Saraya is wrestling again, the fact that Shawn Michaels came back from a broken back and then had that match with Undertaker where he lands in the small of his back on the announce table and it doesn't budge, and then completes the match and he was fine. Kurt Angle wins a gold medal with a broken freaking neck, and then wrestles Brock Lesnar with a broken freaking neck. Like, these guys are resilient and their bodies are trained in a way that they kind of adapt to it. And as long as he's not putting himself at risk of breaking his back permanently, and he finds a way to adapt to his working style to bump in a way that's more comfortable, I don't think he would bump if he is, like, say the RKO, he's landing on his hip. We talked about he's turning on his side and on his hip. I don't think he's going to wrestle long enough for that to create a problem where he has to get hip replacement. Because he's not going to wrestle for another 10 or 15 years of doing that every single night, 300 nights a year. He's going to cut that way back on his schedule. So I think he'll be fine. I just want him to come back.
Yeah, for sure. Miss Eagle, what you got?
WWE has made the decision to split up JBL and Baron Corbin, a move that has put an end to yet another failed push attempt for Baron Corbin. I feel
they need to put Baron Corbin in a Buried Alive match, because JBL buried him, I think, deeper than any, like, this was worse than JBL burying the Ascension.
I feel like Corbin can't like catch that break, like, with his character.
I don't know if it's a break. I think this is an obvious sign that the dude's just not meant for this role in professional wrestling. Like, he might be a nice guy, he might be able to do the moves, he's got a little bit of character, but this is Ed Leslie once he lost the barber gimmick.
I would say that when it comes to Corbin, I think part of it has to fall on him, and I'll explain. Remember when he was Mr. Money in the Bank?
Yes.
And he went and did something real stupid, and WWE pulled it off of him, made him lose it in a ridiculous way. Because he was being punished. Ever since then, he has become a yes man for the company, and he bends over backwards to do it because he didn't want to lose the job. He just has continued to be that yes man instead of kind of standing up for himself a little bit. And I'm no disparaging to Baron Corbin, the person, but I understand he wants to keep his job. But I mean, like, Sad Corbin was over. That gimmick was hot. But it also has a shelf life. It is a finite gimmick. You can't do that forever. Happy Corbin didn't work. I think you take him off TV for a couple months, and then you bring him back as the Lone Wolf again, and just let him get back to the Lone Wolf, and let him almost mimic his gimmick after Gunther. You know what I mean? Just a hard-hitting, rock-solid, no-nonsense. Get him away from goofy stuff for a while. Get him away from all that. Let him run right through the mid-card or whatever show they put him on as the Lone Wolf. Get him in either a United States feud or a Intercontinental feud. And then you can see where he goes from there. There are just some people that are never meant to leave the mid-card. That is just their role in life. There's nothing wrong with that. He's a good hand, as the term goes. I think that he's just yes-manned himself into kind of that, let's try this. Yes, boss. Let's try this. Okay. Like, he's just kind of, there's a bit of a defeatist attitude to himself after almost getting fired that he's never come out of. And that's very obvious to me. If he can either get himself out of that, or like if Triple H sat him down and said, look, we're going to get you back to that NXT Lone Wolf. We're going to get you, but we're going to get rid of the goofiness. You're going to go full solid by yourself, you know, and just go. I think maybe he can, like, get him out of that funk, maybe.
Yeah, and the 50 booking doesn't help. Like, let's look at, like, Lanny Poffo and Tito Santana, both pretty much mid-card talents. I know Tito had, some successful with belts, but, when Tito went into a match, there was a 50-50 chance of Tito winning the match. Like, even when he went against Mr. Perfect for the IC belt, there was a chance that, hey, you know what, he might beat Mr. Perfect for that IC belt to get, in that tournament. Lanny Poffo Brooklyn Brawler, you never thought they were going to win matches. Like, you just never did. And they were, they were guys that were, quote unquote jobbers, where Tito was that 50-50 booker. But Tito wasn't a main eventer. He was a mid card guy. And now all WWE is doing is developing Tito Santana's, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but they need to really, I think, develop some more, Lanny Poffos. Like, they need to develop some guys. You go in there, they got a name, they got some music, cool. They're going to lose. Okay, that's fine. That's their job. But there's so much into this 50-50. It's almost like society with everybody gets a trophy. Old man talking here. Everybody gets a trophy mentality. That guys aren't getting over. And Baron Corbin is one of those guys. Like, they're trying to make him Tito when really he needs to be Lanny. And I know it's probably not topical to talk about Lanny Poffo. I know he just passed away. I know the guy personally. I'm sad that he's gone, but at the same time, Lanny knew his role, and he did it really well.
And also, a quick sidebar, I'd like to say that you say old man talking, participation trophies, everybody's got to get them. It was actually your generation's fault because you insisted your kids get participation trophies. It wasn't the kids. That was the parents' fault. I just want to say that as a 40-year-old. Because I grew up in that. No, I actually 1,000% agree with you. You're right. We don't have it. We have too many. Using your example, we have too many Tito's, not enough Lannys, not enough Brooklyn Brawlers. We got to have some people. The problem is that nowadays people like you were almost making Alpha Academy be the Brooklyn Brawler tag team for a while when they first came together. They were supposed to be that, and then people fell in love with them. Yeah, it's kind of hard nowadays because so many people with social media they get more vocal. And it's a double-edged sword because social media has helped them figure out, we need to push this person or we need to go this route. At the same time, because there's so many people being vocal, I love Otis. We need to push Otis. It's like, well, he was doing really good in that kind of jobber role for a while. Like, we should have let him do it a little bit longer. But now, he may become part of the maximum male models, which, please, yes, please, give me Otis in Daisy Duke's sequence short.
All I see is Chris Farley and Patrick Swayze dancing on SNL.
And you do that. You have that. You have Dio come out in a Chippendale. You have Monster side. You have Otis in the middle, and they come out and do it. Yes, do it. 1,000%. And make Maxine fall in love with Otis. That look she gave him, and she's like, it's a perfect specimen of man when he walked by. That kind of thing. Fucking give me that 1,000%. And then somebody else from NXT to join Alpha Academy and let him go serious wrestler again. Because Otis is the fact that he's doing a Caterpillar again. He's already back to being a babyface with the crowd. Yes, give me him in the Maximum Models 1,000%. And then bring out R-Truth to sing them out to the ring every week. Fucking yes, give me all of that 1,000%. I'll buy the shirts, everything. I want it. I want to see him in a mesh crop top with pierced nipples. Fucking give me it all. I want it.
The perfect way to bring Mandy Rose back. She can try to bring him back into her stable.
By the way, on the Mandy Rose thing, real quick, I found out the real reason why she was fired.
What was that?
Wasn't that she was doing the naughty pictures and videos. It was that she was doing the naughty pictures and videos wearing the tag belt, or the title belt, in a lot of them. She had the NXT Women's title in a lot of those pictures.
Oh.
Yeah.
My research has not shown that. If you've got any of those pictures, I'll give you my email offline so you can send those to me.
Yeah, I do. It's a no-no. If you were to go, because it just so happens I just found out randomly, I wasn't looking or anything, it just happened to fall on my lap. But free to join Mandy Rose's fan time page, and there's a lot of pictures on there with her with the belt. And I'm like, oh, that's it. That's why. That's why. She brought the product into what she was doing. And that's a no-no.
But yet Paige could have the belt with stuff on it.
No, she wasn't paying that. That was like somebody broke into her phone and leaked it. And I know people are like, oh, well, Shawn Michaels did Playgirl. Yeah, secretly Vince McMahon okayed the whole project.
Yeah.
That was a work on TV. It was a shoot that he actually approved of. And don't forget, that was the Attitude Era. And also we had all that run with Playboy for, 5 years? Where all the divas were getting to do Playboy.
Yeah.
That was a different era. That wasn't the same thing. Now we're in a PG era. We're a publicly traded company, and the fact that you're putting the product on that site is a problem. and I think that she just didn't want to shut it down, which understandably so. She made over $1 million in December, so why would she shut it down? She's making more money doing that than she was wrestling. So I can understand her being like, I don't really want to shut that down. They're like, okay, well, you understand that we have to let you go. Now she's suddenly like, she's on this like press tour of acting like she didn't know why she got fired, which I find very weird. I don't know why she's doing that. She's burning bridges right now, and that's stupid. Because they could give her a year where she's obviously gotten rid of those pictures with the, all she did was take that stuff with the belt down, and they would probably let her back.
No, because it still violates her contract, because she's making money outside of sanctioned WWE things. So they would...
Like on Twitch and things, that.
Yes, but WWE gets a cut, and those are approved things.
Third-party sites.
Yeah.
Yeah, third-party sites, they've changed the rule. You're allowed to do it again, but they do get a cut of it. Because, right now, the party's going on, and Breeze and Breeze, who's back with the company, he works for Up, Up, Down, Down, which is owned by WWE. That's why he's doing WWE videos. They're on the party right now with Adam Cole and Claudio. But whatever revenue comes from that, the YouTube channel that they have and the Twitch channel, part of it does go back to WWE for using that name. That's why he can use Tyler Breeze again, because he's back with the company. And Dakota Kai has her Twitch back. Shayna has a YouTube. Asuka now has a YouTube again. And it's very weird. It's called Kana Chan TV. And you just watch her through her day, but she doesn't say a fucking word. One word. It's very weird, and there's no music. It's just her putting her makeup on, getting in the car, going to the arena, getting ready, and that's the video. And she's
my gimmick.
Hundreds of thousands of views on YouTube. It's weird, but WWE gets a part of that. Either she didn't want to give them a part, or she just wouldn't shut it down. But I mean, I think that after this, depending on who buys it, that's going to be a big part of it too. What company buys it. Which I still think Comcast is the leading people to buy it because of the Peacock deal, because of USA and etc. Disney's a very, very close second, probably a 1B. That could make a big difference on whether she can come back to it or not.
Miss Eagle, what's next on your list?
So the next thing on my list is Tony Khan has come out and said that AEW talent and staff said that they were asked by WWE to break their contracts. He wouldn't name names, but yeah.
I feel like tampering has been a big thing in professional wrestling the whole time. We've talked about this in the past on this show when they brought up tampering initially, mid last year. TK brought it up, and I said that these guys are independent contractors. This isn't a players' union. This isn't like the NFL or Major League Baseball. So I said then that tampering's been around for the whole 115 years that this incarnation of professional wrestling has been around. Because it was always about how are you going to get the popular guys from the other territories in your territory to work for you. You know what I mean? Jim Crockett called all the WWF guys that he had numbers for to try to see what it would take to get them to come to Georgia or come to Florida or come to the Carolinas. Lawler was in the pocket of everybody trying to figure out how much it would cost to get them booked in Memphis or St. Louis. You know what I mean? Or, Mid-America with Louisiana. This happened all the time. So tampering isn't new in the sport, at least from my perspective.
Yeah, and it's not just the sport, AFL and NFL, baseball, the same thing with the different leagues that were around. It's not new, and somebody's going to know somebody, so you can talk to them offline. If I get an application and I don't want to do a formal interview, I call a place, I ask for the person's name, and I said, hey, is so-and-so there? No, they don't work here anymore. Oh, really? Why? What happened? Why'd they leave? And then that, because I can't legally ask the question, why did they leave, for a formal interview? So, yeah, that's pro wrestling and that's sports, and that's I think it's any company, any professional company, you want to find out about something. I get an application. My former assistant food and beverage director, she would go on their Facebook immediately and go, oh, look at this, like they partied and da 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 da. So reaching out and touching base with somebody hey, how do you like your job? Do you really think it's fair? I don't see anything really wrong with that at all. What are you making? How much is your salary? Blah blah blah. Just give me a range. Again, it's market research, and I think that's how you hide it.
I also think that, first of all, Tony's just being a whiny little bitch. I'm just gonna say it.
Fair enough.
Do you remember like we had it was Clash of the Castle, then NXT had a pay-per-view, and then AEW had All Out. And Tony got pissed that they ran the same weekend as him.
Mm-hmm.
We've been own this weekend. First off, no, you don't. You're a brand new fucking company. They own that weekend. They also did their show on Saturday, and then purposely did their NXT show at 4 p.m. So it's not to interfere with yours. So shut the fuck up. They gave you a better audience because they were already hyped from an awesome NXT show. That weekend was one of the best weekends of wrestling we've had until CM Punk opened his mouth at that press conference and fucked everything up. But one of the best weekends we've ever had in pro wrestling. So NXT had us all hyped when we were done watching it. We didn't watch along. We did an all-day-long watch-along. We were so hyped. We were like, we cannot wait for All Out. This is going to be great. So all it did was help them. But Tony's going to be like, oh, well, they're trying to help people to break their contract. No, they're talking to people. You're blowing it out of proportion. Because these people are not happy with you, and they're talking about they want out of their contracts because they're unhappy. I know he's probably talking about Andrade. He's probably talking about Miro. He's probably talking about Malachi, which is why Malachi took a break. All that stuff. And the thing is, an AEW contract is not a WWE contract. Technically, WWE can make that claim. Hey, you're tampering. Look at our contracts. You can't do that. An AEW contract allows them to work independent dates. It allows them to work with other federations. It allows them to do that kind of stuff. It's an open, independent contract. Shut up. Trying to generate drama to create this war between the two companies, while Triple H is like, I keep an eye on what they're doing and I see what they're, but I don't acknowledge them because I don't want to. Basically, he's just like, it is what it is. We're just gonna keep doing us. We're not gonna let them affect us, and that hurts Tony. He's like that kid. Like he's the kid at the party. He's that kid at that birthday party. It's not his birthday, but he wants all the attention.
Mm-hmm.
I said earlier on TikTok that he is trying to shoot his way into a work with WWE. Like, it's almost like he's bringing them up to try to get a rise out of them, to get a response. You know what I mean? He says things like, I posted on TikTok earlier from the Dan Liebetard show, No Free Shoutouts, on Friday. He said that he feels like right now the hatred between both companies stems from them, that they absolute hate each other. You know what I mean? And like saying stuff like that out in the open, you would never hear Vince McMahon at any point in WWE or F's or WWF's history come out and go, I hate Ted Turner. You know what I mean? Like, Vince would have never said that.
Well, he did make those fun vignettes.
I was about to say, I think he actually did.
Yeah.
I think he actually did a whole promo, but look what happened. When he did it. They lost 83.5 weeks in ratings, and then he's like, oh, wait a minute. How about we don't acknowledge their existence and we just focus on us? Boom. There you go. Like, he did do that. He did actually come out and said he hated Ted Turner, basically, and like he had those stupid Hulk and Macho Man promos where they were on Larry King and all that shit. Like, yeah. So he actually did do that, and it blew up in his fucking face, and he learned his lesson. And Triple H was there for all of that. He lived through that, and he knows it doesn't do me any good. It also doesn't do me any good to burn bridges. Triple H is the one guy I think would do a forbidden door with AEW. I really do. I believe that. But Tony Khan's is going to be the one to shoot it down.
Yeah, which is dumb on his part because Dusty Rhodes never talked about the Monkeys, and that would be the Monkeys. So and again, aging myself, like that's what it is. Why would a main eventer, the WWF, talk about the mid card or a lower card guy, AEW, and send the hate mail right here to yellowshoeguy.com? I don't give a crap. But that's what happens. Is when WWE acknowledged WCW, like you said, won for 83 weeks. When WCW acknowledged WWE even more so than ever, what happened? Mick Foley won the belt, and boom, never turned back. Although I guess the one thing that really never turned back was when X-Pac jumped over, they never lost again. Wherever Sean Waltman is, the ratings follow.
I love that man. I just want to say that. I love
He's-
Sean. Awesome.
Al, what's next on your list? We'll knock one or two more out before we start jumping into Foley.
Let's see.
I have a rumor, Allie.
Go for it.
When you're done, okay, I can do it now.
Yeah, go ahead.
Did anybody notice that the Rainmaker showed up in Noah and took out their champion? You know, the same guy that kicked him in the face and he beat the ever-loving shit out of.
Yeah, I saw that clip today. I saw that he. I'm going to go ahead and say it. You and I are going to have to be the only two that have an input on this. Bobby thinks Japanese wrestling is fan fiction, and Allison pretty much sticks to the motherland with it. Did I make him mad? Is he gone? But I think Okada. I wrote an article last summer, right before the G1 happened, about New Japan's over-reliance on Okada and how, you know how you were just talking about the 50-50 booking with Corbin, for instance. Like, Okada is so predictable with the way they book him that it's like a babyface will have the title, and then a heel champion will come in and dethrone and take over New Japan Pro Wrestling. And then it always starts the summer before Wrestle Kingdom, and it'll be the G1 climax, and then Okada wins it, and then it's the build from July and August through January. Is he going to be able to beat the Hill Champion? Won't he? Will the Hill Champion lose it before then? Because there's always that one or two defenses. So I think New Japan has had an over-reliance on Okada. But to see him go now into Noah and to see the possibility of him coming stateside to do some work with Strong, I think this will give us a new side of Okada that we haven't really gotten. Because even when we saw him at Forbidden Door, we didn't really see what Okada was made of. Because he had that TK booking ahead of him. So to be able to get to see Okada the same way we're seeing somebody like a Speedball Mike Bailey, or a Kota, for instance. Ibushi is another example of it. I think we're about to see the gloves come off of Okada and finally have a chance to really see who he is in this newest version of him.
Well, the main crux of the rumor is that, you know, it's already been talked about that he was on his way out the door of New Japan in the first place.
Yeah.
Is he going to Noah, or is Noah just a stint before he goes somewhere else?
Well, New Japan, the way their contracts are rigged right now is the fact that they have similar contracts to the way AEW is set up in that when somebody signs the contract, if they have a standing relationship with another promotion, like Moxley and GCW, for instance, they gave Mox an exception to their approved indies for Mox. New Japan does that for their talent. Excuse me, if they've got, you know, relationships with third parties, they'll kind of grandfather those in. Okada's a young lion. He came through the program, came through the dojo, though. He doesn't have those other relationships. So this is the first time we're really seeing Okada spread his wings into these other promotions, because we haven't got it up until now. He's kind of been nothing but New Japan and Inoki's brainchild.
Yeah. I just know, like, his contract's coming up in New Japan, and supposedly he's not re-signing. He's not happy. He's been very vocal about not being happy. And so the rumor was that, at first it was that he was just leaving Japan overall. But now that he showed up in Noah, it's like, does he do a short stint in Noah, or does he sign with Noah? You know what I mean?
I think I want to see him in the States. I want to see him come and sign in somewhere. I don't want him to sign somewhere like WWE that's going to take him off the market. Have him sign with somebody like Impact so we can see him work in GCW, so we can see him work in Impact, so we can see him work with AEW, so we can see him at Limitless, so we can see him work with the top American talent versus him just coming to the States and then being thrown into a contract that only lets him work with one talent pool. Because it's just going to be New Japan for WWE if that's the case. So I want him to go somewhere where we're going to actually be able to see him work if he does end up in America. What you got, Miss Siegel?
In a similarly related topic, During an appearance on Matt Hardy's podcast, Sean Ross Sapp addressed Carl Anderson and Luke Gallows not being around for Royal Rumble and recent episodes of Raw. Apparently, WWE agreed to a clause in the Good Brothers' new contract that essentially says, if you're not going to use us, we don't want to be there.
More buyer's remorse on Triple H.
I don't think so. I think it's actually a smart move on his part. Like right now with AJ being injured, they had to pull him from that storyline. So why have them show up and waste time traveling and all that stuff? Let them stay home.
Because they wouldn't get a pop if they were there.
I disagree. I think the Good Brothers are good and over right now. They were huge in Impact. Impact loved the Good Brothers. And I think WWE... I do disagree with them being on main event, though. I did say sending them to main event was kind of... that's kind of a downgrade. That's worse than New Day going to NXT, in my opinion. You know, and I get why they're there. But, like, Good Brothers being on main event seems like a waste of talent.
Main event gets higher ratings than Impact. So... the whole thing with Impact is that's, oh, I'm going to be out of touch. Smartest kid on the short bus. Like, get over it. Yeah, it's a glorified, it's an indie that's got some money behind it.
But isn't that what WWE is and, AEW at the core of it?
Yeah.
What?
Isn't that all, wasn't WWE just an indie promotion that got some financial backing at one point?
WWE?
Yeah.
Their house shows were at Madison Square Garden. How can you ever call WWE an indie show?
Because other wrestling promotions have worked house shows at Madison Square Garden. It's not an exclusive thing to WWE.
Yep. Not anymore. Maybe in the 60s and 70s and 80s, maybe. But I guarantee you WWE also worked high school gyms just as much as they worked MSG, though.
The reality of it is
Very rare.
main event doesn't get any ratings because they're on the Peacock and there are no ratings for streaming services right now.
And that's how Impact gets on cable.
But Impact has a hardcore fan base. And the Good Brothers are over with the hardcore fans. And they were over when they came out against Judgment Day. But with AJ being injured, they have to put that Judgment Day story on hold. So, now putting them on main event I think was a bad idea. Because it feels like a kiss of death. But by going, hey guys, with AJ injured, we don't really have anything for you to prolong this story, because one of the things that I love about Triple H is that he books people in multiple storylines. The Judgment Day is a perfect example of that, where they've had multiple feuds at the same exact time. So, if somebody gets injured, it doesn't derail the entire story and you're screwed, they can go somewhere else. The only downside is that the Good Brothers were not there long enough to have multiple feuds, so when AJ went down, they kind of got screwed, and now they're just off TV for now. When AJ's healed, they will come back with him, they will be a faction. There's a good chance Jay White makes it to WWE. We get a Bullet Club war. The fact that WWE is mentioning Bullet Club ad nauseum now. We could get some kind of Bullet Club storyline. And there you go. I don't think the Good Brothers is buyer's remorse. I think it's the exact opposite, because they're like, it would be buyer's remorse if he was like, oh God, what do I do with these guys? I'm paying them. They got to be here. They're going to be miserable again. I got to do something with them. No, it's like, oh, in your contract, if I can't use you, you get to stay home and still be happy. You're getting paid and you get to stay home. Guys, AJ's injured, your storyline's on hold. Go have a cocktail on me, bro.
Why not play and plug either Rey Mysterio or Edge to replace AJ?
That's a fucking garbage move. I hate when bookers do that. Plug and play is a terrible thing to do with storylines. And the fact is, the Edge storyline does not actually involve AJ and the Good Brothers and that feud. It's a different feud. So you're trying to then merge feuds, and it gets weird. I don't like the plug-and-play system. I think it's stupid. And especially not Mysterio, because, again, that's a different feud, but that's focused around Dominic. The Judgment Day and Rey have run their course. It's simply about Dominic now, and we're building to that moment at WrestleMania where we get father versus son. That's fine. If you pull him out of that and try to make it about the entire Judgment Day, you're ruining the Dominic Rey storyline. You could try to play it off, but because you're merging shit, you're making the waters muddy, and it's just not good storytelling. From somebody who, not only was I a wrestler, but I also booked my own show, and I've been a writer for several years. I've done both fiction writing and journalistic writing. That is not how you tell a story. You just don't do it. And I think the one thing I love about Triple H the most is that the fact that he went and hired a director of long-term storytelling, something that Vince would never do, because that man ripped up scripts 30 minutes before a show. The fact that they are planning shows out for months and then have contingency plans in case something happens, like somebody gets injured. Because in this sport, people get injured all the time. So it's hard to book out long plans, but they're doing it. Is every story hitting? No. Nobody bats 1,000 in this business. Nobody bats 1,000 in any business. The fact is, he's doing well enough. He's learning. He's also kind of learning as he goes. Because again, he went from, yes, he was booking NXT, but he had help. Now he's the man in charge over this multi-billion-dollar company, publicly traded. Still has to answer to stockholders, which is a completely different thing than what NXT was doing. And I think that you just pull the Good Brothers off TV. They'll get a pop when they come back, because the hardcore fans and crowd will pop. Some of the casual fans who know them will pop. It may not be an Edge pop. It may not be a Cody wins the Rumble pop, but they'll get a pop. But I mean, let's talk about this. I went to the Royal Rumble. I was there in San Antonio. Nia Jax got a fucking pop. She also got laughed out of the building after she got dumped over the rope. Chelsea Green got a fucking pop. Pat McAfee got the loudest pop of the night coming out. Like, the casual fans are learning who these people are. So, like, Roxanne Perez got a massive pop. That place exploded when she came out. Now, partially because she is from Texas, so the Texas people knew her from the Indies. But also, her NXT time has really shined. And I honestly think Roxanne Perez belongs on the main roster, and then you make her go after her main title. But, like, legitimately, the casual fan is starting to learn more about the business with these Ryan Satin out of character interviews, Peacock putting all these shoot interviews and backstage stuff up, YouTube getting more popular with that kind of stuff. They're learning the ropes and becoming closer to the hardcore fan than just a casual fan now, because it is so easily accessible. And the fact that WWE is now openly talking about New Japan, talking about the fact that Carl Anderson was the never open weight champion, talking about the Bullet Club. People are going to go look that up. They're going to be curious. They're going to have their phone in their hand. They're going to Google that shit. The Good Brothers are fine. I don't think there's buyer remorse there at all. I have been very long-winded, and I apologize.
All right, we are going to hop into the meat and taters of this conversation. We did last week. We had RN on. We talked about Triple H, the game. We broke down his career. This week, we are going to talk about the hardcore legend, a world champion, a podcast host, a stand-up comedian. He played Santa Claus. This man, in my humble opinion, has had more impact on the sport of professional wrestling than anyone. I say this a lot. It's my show, and I get to direct the conversation however I see fit. I always say Sean was the best entertainer, Brett was the best in-ring performer, Bruno had the best tenure and career, but Mick Foley, in my opinion, Foley changed more in wrestling than anyone before him and anyone since. So my first question for you, Superbeard, what are your initial thoughts when I say the name Mick Foley?
Hardcore legend, but even a bigger-hearted, kind human being of a legend. Like, legend of a human being. Like the living embodiment of Santa Claus. Like you mentioned Santa Claus. He is the living embodiment of what I call Santa Claus. Just fun, jovial, the man lives for it, but he's the nicest human being in the world, and gave everything to this sport, and I mean everything. And we as fans are better off for it.
I 100% say that the world doesn't deserve Mick Foley. He's such a great guy. Bobby, kind of the same question to you, man. What are your initial thoughts when you think of Mick Foley as the person?
Mick Foley as the person, I love. Like, absolutely amazing. Theme park enthusiast. Noelle is absolutely phenomenal. I'm glad Mick put her on the planet.
1 hour, 14 minutes.
Yeah, Mick Foley, the professional wrestler, I disagree. I think he opened way too many doors and too many options to people doing too many stupid things in the ring and hurting themselves on purpose. He was ECW before ECW, and I just think Foley put his body on the line too much, and I think you see it on the indies a lot. I think you see it a lot of times. Guys just do too much in the ring that isn't safe, and that's why Mick Foley retired as young as he retired, because of that. Was it good to watch? Yeah, I loved watching it. You know, it took a documentary and watching Noel and Dewey cry about him getting hit in the head, which in Rock went over the line, and Foley said that, for him to start changing his style from going to that, from that brutal Mankind type character to the kinder, gentler Sacco Mankind. So yeah, I again, personal wise, love Foley. Like, shared the locker rooms with him, been around town with him, been around town with his daughter. Not like that. Absolutely love them, love him as a human being. But I just feel like he created a style of pro wrestling that has gotten people hurt. And maybe he didn't create it, but he was the biggest visual for people to watch it. And I think that part of Foley's career, as fun as it was to watch, I cringe watching some of the stuff now, and I don't cringe much.
Allison, you say he's one of your favorites of all time. What about Foley that you've watched kind of made him your favorite?
A lot of it has to do with, like, Mick Foley the person, not necessarily the wrestler, because he's such an incredible human being. You and I have met him. I got I bought 2 cameos from him for Will when he was sick, and like the extra mile that he went to on these cameos to like make them special, like, was incredible. And like when we met him in July, he remembered exactly who I was, who Will was, making the cameos, like the whole thing. Like, to me, that's incredible because he's like one of the top people, like top purchase people on Cameo. And like he remembered it, and the 2 cameos were almost a year apart from each other. And at the beginning of the second cameo, he remembered the first cameo. As a wrestler, I like the little bit more of the hardcore stuff. To me, it's cool. I don't know. I like fucking dudes going off the top of the cages of the table. I mean,
It's a stylistic thing. We don't yuck any yum.
yeah, I think it's cool and badass. Like, yeah, we don't kink shame.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing. I think it's super cool, and that, like, seeing the juxtaposition of like him being like this super, super nice guy, and then like this super hardcore, like, blood and gore wrestler. I don't know. Like, I just like it.
I love the fact that in between the 2 cameos, and this is a personal thing, and I got a lot of really cool as this is one of those weird, like, double-edged swords coming out of a cancer diagnosis and going through the chemo and everything, because I got a lot of really cool interactions while that happened. And the Jimmy Hart thing where Bobby called me and I was buck-ass naked, finishing up a round of chemo and getting a sponge bath, and Jimmy Hart FaceTimes me at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because of Bobby. The Mick Foley things. But one of the things that stand out is in those cameos, you get to message the person that you're making the cameo with to kind of talk about what you want. Mick left that message open to her so that way he could check in to see how I was doing. This man didn't know me from Paul or Peter, but he made it a point to text her to be like, for at least a little bit after he sent the chemo, to continue to check in to make sure I was doing well. So that right there says that. What's up, Mr. B-Roll? Thank you for the follow. See, Bobby, I told you the things come up on the screen. You said it doesn't do it. See? Okay. But you guys get what I'm saying. Foley's a fucking amazing guy. There's no question about that. But let's kind of start. It's kind of hard when you talk about the guy that, like I said, and I'm a mark for him. Big mark. And when you break down a career of somebody who revolutionized it so much, I've kind of got it broken down into 3 big chunks. So we're going to start in the early 90s. Bobby, you talked about him revolutionizing a style of wrestling that was very synonymous with him, that evolved into the ECWs and the deathmatch stuff. But when he first started, we saw him in WCW. We saw him feuding with people like Sting, Abdullah the Butcher, Vader. Like, what were your first opinions? Because you're going to be the one that you were already watching wrestling regularly by this point. Early 90s. Superbeards, you and I are kind of close in the same age. Bobby's old enough to remember. What was it like seeing such a brash character come on the screen alongside Sting at this point? Because Cactus Jack at that point in the early 90s was very different than anything we were seeing in WCW.
Yeah, like I remember going up to the TV and fixing the coat hanger to make sure I could get it in like clear. And, you know, even though it was in black and white, Cactus Jack Manson, Cactus Jack Manson, like it was like crazy, like because like he took that name Cactus Jack Manson because the Manson interviews were going on. Like this was the first time like people were like seeing, you know, Charles Manson since like, you know, the horrific stuff that, you know, his family did in the 70s. And I, as a young kid, I was just being introduced to it. Like I didn't know who Charles Manson was, and I was like, who is this guy? And then all of a sudden you see a guy that looks just like him wrestling. And, you know, those devastating elbows that he did, like off the apron, you know, down on the floor, like, again, it was dangerous. It looked dangerous. And I will say this about him. He never hurt his opponents. He hurt himself. And, you know, not being smart or, you know, halfway smart back then, you know, it was a shoot. And it was like, dang, like this guy is like crazy. But to me, I was like, you know, if this guy, if Cactus Jack is this hurt after hitting that elbow on his opponent, then what does his opponent must feel? Because if he's putting himself in this much pain, then the opponent must be like absolutely like, insufferable. Like, and I love the way you say break it down, because that's basically what he did is he broke down his own body by doing this stuff to get people over. I think he was a big enough talent that he could have worked smarter, or not, maybe not smarter, safer. He could have worked safer for himself. And would it have looked as devastating? Because I do think that his facials were legitimate. Like when he was in pain, you could see it. So I don't know how much there was character development in that, or it was just him actually, dude, that hurt, and he can't hide it.
Superbeard, when you watch these old clips from WCW in the early 90s, do you think it was best for Cactus to go to WCW first? Do you think Cactus Jack or the Cactus Jack Manson style character would have gotten over in WWF in 1991 the same way he did in WCW?
I don't think in the same way. I think it would have got over, but you gotta remember back then we had the, you know, Steve Kern as Dundee, you know, like that kind of Crocodile Dundee character. We had Tony the Clown, we had, you know, the Repo Man, we had IRS.
Everybody had a job, right?
Yeah, everybody had a job, everybody had an over-the-top gimmick. They were larger-than-life characters. So his character would have morphed in a way, and I don't think they'd have let him work his style. He would have been miserable. And it could have ended his career early, just because he would have I think it might have pushed him to give up. So while the character would have gotten over, it wouldn't have been the character we know. It would have been a Vince McMahon version of the character, and it would have gotten over because he would have given it his all at first. Like he would have gone into the job and given it his all. Like, and so it would have gotten over. But I mean, remember Nails. Like that. Like it would have been something like that. And it would have been, you know, probably better for Vince McMahon. He wouldn't have been attacked in his office had it been Foley and not that Nails dude. But yeah, I think it worked out best going to WCW because they were a little bit still more
real.
At the time, well, it's not just real. They were kind of an indie, even though they had TV. They were an indie still. They still had that kind of indie feel, so they were a little bit more open to trying things. Like they were a territory still. Like they were still kind of feeling like a territory. They were NWA. They were, you know, they weren't the WWF at the time was becoming that cereal box product. The Hulkamania, like it was all that. Like it was becoming it was more pageantry than product. That was when that was really going up. It was starting to ramp up, and then a steep dive down. WCW was still, we're just about the wrestling. We're about the product. We're about what the people in the crowd sees, and hopefully it translates to TV. But they were still learning TV. So yeah, I think it was better for them.
I think if he would have come in WWE at that point, WWF at that time, I think he would have been a failed Undertaker gimmick. Because they would have tried to make him, this killer Undertaker immortal. Love Foley to death. I would actually love to see him try to do the Undertaker gimmick back then. Because back then we wouldn't have known what the Undertaker gimmick is. But I would have liked to see what he did with it.
The next step in his career, though, that WCW run kind of started that first step of Cactus Jack. Between that 94, 95, 96 run, he had 3 big stops in his career. He worked in ECW, he worked in Smoky Mountain Wrestling with James E., and he worked in IWA in Japan. And I feel like all 3 of these places had very different effects on his career. Smoky Mountain Wrestling being the shortest stint working with Cornette, almost a negligible stint. He spent less than a year in the East Tennessee and Appalachia. But the ECW days and then running into Japan, I know this isn't your cup of tea, Allison. You've already preached about how much you love hardcore wrestling. Super Beard, what do you think about death matches and stuff rolling into... Because you can't talk about Foley without bringing up the Kawasaki King of the Deathmatch tournament. You guys hear the cat again, don't you? I can see Bobby's face. That fucking cat, man. So what are your initial impressions on deathmatch wrestling and some of the stuff they were doing at that point in Japan in the 90s?
I'm not a huge fan of deathmatch wrestling, but it's an experience thing. I used to, because I wrestled 6 days a week during my 4 years as a wrestler, Tuesday through Sunday, 8 shows a week. Because Saturday and Sunday we'd hit like an afternoon show, then drive to go hit a night show. So
Every day, twice on Sunday, man.
Yeah, I was wrestling, but Tuesday nights was in this bar called Bourbon Street in Pasco, Newport Richie, and we get a packed crowd every Tuesday. But it wasn't for the wrestling; it was 25-cent draft night. To keep everybody's attention, it was called American Combat Wrestling. It was kind of a rip-off of ECW. I worked a lot of hardcore matches. Most of my injuries that led to my retirement from wrestling came from doing that kind of stuff. Like I got power bombed through a ladder, but the guy was inexperienced and he was hyped up and he pulled me in too tight, and so only my head hit the ladder. That was a concussion. Fun times there. And so I've never been it makes me cringe watching deathmatch wrestling, but at the same time, I can appreciate and respect the people that I love Nick Gage. I have a hard time watching him work, but I think he's great.
It's the pizza cutter for me.
Yeah.
Bobby, what do you think about death matches? Because I know they're definitely not your thing, but what about them is the biggest turnoff for you?
Everything. It's not pro wrestling. It's just going out there and it's what's that thing on Jackass? To be dumb, you got to be tough. The song or whatever that they play. That's what deathmatch is. Like, can I prove that I'm tough when I get hit in the head with a light tube? Okay. Like, why is that entertaining? Like, people, and this is good. This might be a cornetism. People might stop and look at 2 dogs having sex on the side of the road. Then you go past it and you might say something to somebody and, do you need to see it again? No. Unless it's like a Chihuahua and like a Great Dane.
But every time you see 2 dogs fucking on the side of the road, you're going to go, look, those 2 dogs are fucking on the side of that road. If you're a pro wrestling fan and you see a guy smash somebody over the face with a light tube, you're going to go, fuck, that was cool.
I'm not going to pay money for it.
But there's an appeal to it. Like Superbeard said, it might not be my cup of tea all the time. Yeah, we don't yuck any yums, but Matt Ritter said it best way back when. He said pro wrestling is like porn. Like there's parody porn, and there's, MILF porn, and there's lingerie porn, and there's gangbang porn. Deathmatch is like gangbang porn. Like you might see one and go, well, that was kind of cool, but that doesn't mean that's what you're going to want to watch every single time you watch it.
But I think the deathmatch fans do want to watch it every single time. Like me, I'm not a deathmatch fan. I don't ever want to watch it. Like if I see a video on YouTube with deathmatch wrestling, I usually fast forward through it. Or go, skip it. Like there's no appeal to me on deathmatch wrestling. It just, again, it's guys just going out there. They're not even like stuntmen. Like I know Ric Flair is famously, compared Mick Foley to. It's just going out there and bleeding and getting hurt because there's nothing else you can do. You can't talk them into the seat. You can't perform in the ring to get them in the seat to buy that ticket. But you can take a light to your forehead or to, a brick to your balls, and that's going to bring them to the seat. I'd rather not be in the seat.
Is that kind?
What's that?
Oh, sorry. No, finish your thought, and then I'll ask my question. Sorry, I thought you were done.
And then I'd say most of the time, the people that are in those seats watching them are their family and friends.
Is this kind of why you don't like AEW as much, because they are a little bit more towards the more bloody, matches? And so I know you don't super care for AEW, but I'm just curious if this was one of those reasons, because they do a little bit more of the gimmicky, not necessarily hardcore death matches, but Mox does a little bit,
I don't know. Dude, yeah, blood and hardcore, I don't mind.
Okay.
I grew up with Ric Flair.
Right. No, I know. I was just curious.
I work shows with Ricky Morton. Ricky Morton bleeds every single match. I don't mind violence. I don't mind any of that stuff. The things that I do mind is good storytelling. And the guy that trained me in the ring, according to Ricky Morton, is the shits. He sucks. He can't tell a story. But he was over in ECW. He was over in WCW. But when you put him in the ring, it's a spot fest. And AEW to me is a spot fest. And I don't think AEW is even comparable to that kind of wrestling. I don't think death matches in AEW are even close. AEW is a lot more entertaining than a death match. And I like it. I tolerate AEW for the goods and watch them, even through the bads when I watch the product. I just hope, I want them to continue to learn. The VPs of AEW are the wrong VPs. Those three guys should not be in charge, because can they perform in the ring? Yep. Do they care about the rest of the locker room? I don't think so. Do they care about the story of what a match really is? No, I don't think they tell the story in the ring. I don't think they can talk in the microphone. And that's my issue with Omega and the Buckies, is they just don't, they can't, they're not pro wrestlers that they're more sports entertainers than what WWE puts out there, or what Chris Jericho is pretending to put out there with his faction. Off the soapbox.
Going back to Mick Foley.
Bring it around.
Well, no, there's actually a great thing to do here. From my time in the indies and working with guys, I found that most people who do deathmatch wrestling are people who either couldn't afford or just refused to go to an actual wrestling school. They got in their backyard and saw some stuff, and Mick Foley's partially to blame for that. But I would say that the differences to what most death matches are, and I will say that GCW has a lot of good storytelling in their stuff. It's still hard to watch because they go way over the top. It's I love Jackass. If you mentioned them earlier, I love the Jackass movies. I think they're great, but even there sometimes ooh, okay, too much. But GCW is just that too much portion a lot of times. But they have a lot of storytelling. But most death matches, hardcore indies, are just guys who have no training and want to get out there. It's I don't have to do an arm drag or a hip toss, because I'm just going to throw a dude through a bunch of light tubes or a bunch of tacks. Mick Foley, on the other hand, and Terry Funk, and a couple of other guys in that class, they did hardcore deathmatch wrestling, but with true ring psychology and true storytelling. It got corrupted and mutated into what it is now by the copycats and the imitators. But what they did had story, it had presence, it had psychology to it. And that's why even Mick Foley to this day, and even Terry Funk to this day, don't really like deathmatch wrestling, because it lost all of what was special about it. Because it was still telling a story, but in this grandiose, absurd, like, also not all the time kind of. It was special, and it just got bastardized into what it is today. So I think that Mick Foley, you're right, he revolutionized it, and it's a double-edged sword with him, because it was for the better and for the worse. Because it was for the better because it brought more eyes to a subsection of wrestling. It was for the worse because every copycat out there missed the truth behind it and just saw the spectacle of it and took that portion.
Right. Like, people didn't realize Terry Funk wasn't doing this because he was this new, young, up-and-coming guy. This is a guy that's in his 60s, and he's doing it to stay relevant. So he took his territory days, he took his pro wrestling psychology from his father, from his brother, from everything a 40-year career at that point in time, and said, how do I stay relevant? And if it takes, exploding barbed wire and stuff like that, I'm going to be able to do the psychology. And Mick Foley, God bless him and lucky for him, he was this 20-something-year-old guy that got to sit under a learning tree with Terry Funk. And the territories, he was in the CWA, he was in WCCW. He's a territory wrestler, so that's how you make your money. And Foley was a smart guy, is a smart guy. And that's where Foley and Funk, I think, are so different than a lot of these other guys, And, Balls Mahoney being, one of those guys, like, he learned a little bit more, like, as he got a little older. But, there's these other guys that are just out there. They do it with no story. They do it with no soul. Like, the matches don't tell you anything. It's just shock for shock value. And again, dude, I'm old enough. I used to watch those, I'll say VHS, the Faces of Fear.
Mm-hmm. Faces of Death or whatever they were?
Yeah, like where people, people like legitimately died or blah, blah, blah. Like their bungee cord was too long and all that kind of stuff.
Actual.
Yeah. Big time fuck ups.
Like I'd watch that stuff, but now, like, if you want to associate that with what I love, professional wrestling, then no. Terry Funk and Mick Foley were different and are different when it comes to that stuff. What Paulie did with ECW a lot of times was different. It still had the blood and guts, but Paulie did it really well. New Jack is one of those guys, crazy guy. Many conversations with him, but the dude, other than maybe a handful of times, actually knew what he was doing in the ring and told a good story on the microphone and in the ring. But he did every now and then go off the deep end, like trying to kill that 19-year-old kid. The other guy that he threw off the scaffold. But there's psychology out there, and if you do the psychology correctly, then yeah, you can use a light tube.
I had, picking up off of that, I had Oren Veit on the show not too long ago. He's a former IWA Mid-South guy. I worked with Ian Rott, and he came out of the last of the ECW days before WWF scooped up everybody. He did, when the deathmatch scene started to break through, he did XPW with Rob Black and some of those guys. He talked about it. He said the deathmatch guys that were trained in traditional wrestling all walk and talk. And as a mark, I love when I get to use industry terms like I know what they mean. But when he said that they walk and talk, they still, some of those older guys still, they still call their spots in the ring. He's like, we don't go out there. He goes, will I ask you ahead of time, are you cool taking this bump on an upside down chair with the legs up? I'm going to ask you ahead of time if you're cool taking these bumps. but they're still going to walk and talk and call their spots on the fly. And I think that's kind of what you guys are both saying here, is Orin is the 2023 version of blending the story and the ring psychology with the deathmatch style of wrestling. He's trying to do in 2023 what you guys say Funk and Foley and, you know, some of those crazy guys across the Pacific were doing in the 90s. One more thing before we branch into the WWF side of it, and both of you brought him up, is Terry Funk. Foley and him have had exchanges in their career throughout time. People use the term all the time, wrestling soulmates. Do you think Terry Funk is more of a wrestling soulmate for Mick Foley than, say, The Undertaker or, say, Edge or Triple H? Do you think Terry Funk is Mankind or Mick Foley's wrestling soulmate? Super Builder, I'm going to let you tee off, then Bobby, you come in right behind him.
I think 1,000% he is. Has he had great feuds since then? Of course. Fantastic ones. But hands down, it's Terry Funk. That's the one. And I think one of the biggest proof of that on a big international stage was the Hell in a Cell 98. And you see Terry Funk going out there and trying to, like, get out there, and even helping by taking a couple shots from The Undertaker to help give him some more time. Like, that alone told you right there, yep, those two are forever connected. That is it. It's hard not to talk about Foley without bringing up Terry, and vice versa. And I think that's just proof enough.
Yeah, with me, if Mick Foley is Brodus Clay, Terry Funk is a Funkadactyl. Like, he's out there, like, singing and dancing and, doing all his praises. Like, he gets him over. Terry Funk, generation difference, like 3 generations probably different than Foley. I think he started, like, in the 60s, maybe even late 50s. Was champion in the NWA in the 70s. Retired. I think he retired in 82. I think might have been Funk's first retirement.
His first retirement was 82, yeah.
Dang, how did I know that?
Because you're fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, but for him to keep going, and, this young protege, Mick Foley, comes in and he takes him under, like I said, what a learning tree, man. Like, I treasure the times I spent in the car with Ricky Morton or in the locker room with him or Barbarian, like all these other guys. Like, dude, to be able to, like, travel, like, not just the country, not up and down the roads, but across the world with Terry Funk and be in the ring in that learning tree, like, it's phenomenal. Mick Foley could only get better with that kind of knowledge. So yeah, to me, there's no other association. I associate Terry Funk closer with Mick Foley than I do Sacco.
Yeah. All right, Al, you're doodling and you're coloring. You got to pay attention.
I'm
to
not
this
doodling. I'm taking notes.
You're taking notes?
See this? Notes.
You're taking notes.
What'd
you say, Super Beard? Sorry?
No, I was saying her notepad was off camera.
Oh.
Oh, she was showing me.
I was showing. Yeah,
She was-
take notes.
She's written down, Bob. Now talked about a woman in professional wrestling associated with Mick Foley in 3 hours.
Actually, I wrote down a segment idea for your show, but that's fine.
Okay.
I looked it up. Terry Funk debuted in 1965.
Was it?
Obviously, yeah, 1965. Also, very interesting, which I didn't realize, because I knew he was married to Victoria Ann Weaver, who unfortunately passed away on my brother's birthday in 2019. They had been married from 1965 to 1975, and then got remarried in 1991, and I didn't know that. I didn't know they had been married prior.
Yeah, he went to like a big party thing. Yeah. And then she passed away, 3 years ago?
March 29th, 2019.
Yeah. Miss Siegel, bringing you into the conversation, because this is going to be a Foley that you know. The Mason the Mutilator Foley. I've got a picture hanging up on the wall. You guys can't see it. 1996, he debuted in Connecticut. They were really unsure of what the fuck to do with this guy, because he wasn't a Vince staple. He wasn't built like WWF superstars. He didn't work like WWF superstars. Nothing about Mick Foley, the person, was the atypical Mick Foley. When you think of this version of Mankind, the brown leather suit, the mask, the hand glove, what do you think when you think about that version now that we're going to say Mankind for the first time?
Are you talking to me specifically?
Yes,
Oh.
I'm starting you this time.
I mean, to me, that's like like you said, it's the Mick Foley that I know. So, like, that Mankind is, to me, like, you know, he's a little bit unsettled. You know, I immediately go to his feud with The Undertaker and, you know, his dive off of the top of the cage and the tooth through his nose and, you know, all that fun stuff.
Before we get there, Super Beard, Bobby, I'm going to ask you guys this. In 96, he had a historic feud with The Undertaker that involved the SummerSlam, the Boiler Room Brawl. This was a historic point because at the end of this match, Paul Bearer turned on The Undertaker. And this was the first time Paul Bearer turned on The Undertaker, and he sided with Foley. What did you guys think about that? Super Beard, you can go first. You're the guest. What did you think the symbolism was there of, you know, William Mooney, the Paul Bearer, Undertaker's manager for so long, even back when he was Texas Red, for them to have him turn on Taker at this point and side with Mankind so early in his WWE run?
I think it was kind of a twofold thing. And first off, I'd like to say that the promo that Mankind did in that boiler room before that match is stuff of legend. Love that promo. That being said, I think what it was because, for those who don't know, the only reason that Mick Foley was there was to fail. Because Jim Ross was very much set on bringing in Mick Foley, and Vince McMahon brought him in solely to prove Jim Ross wrong. He's like, I want him to fail. I'm going to make sure he fails. I'm going to put him in this ridiculous gimmick. I'm going to make sure that Jim Ross is wrong and knows his place. And he wasn't failing. It was working. So then Vince McMahon changes this. It was like, okay, well, now I got to really work on getting this guy over because he's getting over, but we need to do something. And he's not. The promos are great, but it's not, you know, perfect. Also, Undertaker's getting a little stagnant. We need to get him more over as a face. So it worked twofold. It worked to give a mouthpiece to Mankind, and, well, actually, it worked threefold. It gave a mouthpiece to Mankind. It made Undertaker the martyr, and it brought so much fuel to that storyline. So it worked in threefold, and it was the moment that Vince McMahon finally accepted Mick Foley as a potential guy in the business.
Bobby Mack, what'd you think about the old Paul Bearer turn?
You know, I thought it was definitely interesting for the character because Paul Bearer, you know, could you ever really see Paul Bearer with anybody else? Like this isn't Bobby Heenan. It's not Mr. Fuji or, you know, Fred Blassie, the managers of, you know, a little bit out of that time, Jimmy Hart. Like they all were part of, you know, what Jimmy Hart managed the Hart Foundation. Like it was, you know, Bobby Heenan managed guys that fit with him. And Paul Bearer is such a unique character. This isn't Percy Pringle. Percy Pringle could go with anybody. Paul Bearer doesn't go with anybody. He's got to go with somebody that's kind of supernatural, different, evil. And it was a great testament to what, you know, William Mooney could do, and what Paul Bearer, the character, as well, could do. And it was shocking. It was just actually, like, you know, shocking. You know, originally when Undertaker, you know, debuted, yes, he was with Brother Love, but it didn't fit. But we didn't know it didn't fit until Brother Love introduced Paul Bearer, and then it was like, wow, like light bulb on. This is the manager of the Undertaker, and when he turned on him and went with Foley, it's like, how dark must this person be that you have Paul Bearer turn on this guy? And it was a great story. It really was. And I would dare say it's almost like one of the first like cinematic type matches, you know, that became so famous during the pandemic. And it played really, really well.
Allison, between 1996, 1997, and 1998, we saw 3 different variations of Mick Foley. We saw the Mankind character. We saw him bring back Cactus Jack. But we also saw the first WWF incarnation of someone that Foley developed when he was in grade school and high school, and that was the Dude Love character. I want you to describe to the people listening in the chat and the people listening at home on Spotify, I want you to describe who you think Dude Love is. Who is Dude Love, the character? How do you describe him?
I mean, to me, Dude Love is like the... If you were to say that like all three faces of Foley were like different personalities in his head, I would say that Dude Love was like the outgoing, like friendly personality. Like he's the one, that you go have a beer with.
Would you say that Dude Love would be the one most likely to dress up as Santa out of the 3 faces of Foley?
Yes.
Super Beard. Looking at the 3 faces of Foley, once again, Cactus Jack, Mankind, Dude Love. Over this 3-year period, once again, I'm asking you a second question about the hindrance to somebody's career. How do you think this affected Foley throughout this 3-year time period where he was able to manage 3 gimmicks with 3 different storylines, with 3 different characters and 3 different feuds? How do you think he handled it all?
I think it might have been one of his most fun periods in all of his career. Because that is just creative abundance. You just get to have so much fun. And as I have stated time and time again, goofy wrestling for life. Give me it all. Dude Love was great, but the best version of Dude Love was heel Dude Love. Heel Dude Love was fantastic. Loved heel Dude Love. But yeah, getting to kind of like play around, it gave you a chance to keep things fresh in your own mind. Because you went out and did Mankind one night, and then another night you're doing Dude Love, and then you're doing Cactus Jack. You're getting to keep things fresh for yourself, so it kind of revitalizes you, and it doesn't feel like the same thing over and over and over again. So it was probably and I know he's talked very fondly of that time, so I would imagine it's probably a period that he looks back on incredibly fondly and incredibly fulfilling. It also showed that he was given a lot of leeway from Vince. The trust there at that point was huge, that he was allowed to do that. And I think that all culminates with that Royal Rumble appearance where he's in the Royal Rumble 3 times, which is a record, which he technically could have done 4, because there's technically 4 personalities, because there's Mick Foley and then there's the rest. So he could have done 4, but I think that it just showed like to me, thinking about it, because I had my main heel character when I was wrestling, but I had a fun character that I did on the side. It could very, very rarely, because when I got booked, it was booked off a previous show, so they were booking it off the gimmick that I had. But every now and then, when I was doing my own promotion, I got to play around and do this very fun, goofy character that I had with a mask and everything. And it was so fulfilling to just go out and do something different. And I can only imagine, again, based on everything he said, of how fulfilling that must have been.
Mr. Shoe Guy, as a wrestling purist, when you were coming up as a fan, by the late 90s, like when you saw Foley come out 3 different times in that 98 Rumble, like what was your first impression as like I said, as a wrestling purist? You grew up watching the NWA, WCW, you saw WWF thrive and come into its prime. But then in 98, we saw something that kind of went against everything kayfabe stood for, was because we saw the same dude come out 3 different times. Like, what did you think about that?
My yellow shoes back then, I was like, this is like really kind of odd. Like, my yellow shoes now, standing in them, knowing, more about stuff and backstage and everything. Like, I think it's like really cool. It's like Super Beard mentioned, coming out in a mask. Like that's classic for, wrestlers, indie or, the guys that, on cable TV, coming out in a mask, like portraying another character. is something totally different than what Foley did, because Foley wasn't wearing a mask, like other than Mankind's, mask, but we all could see his face or know who he was. He wasn't pretending to be somebody else. Like like the indie scenes, the most classic gimmick I think definitely in Tennessee wrestling is having a Russian gimmick come out. So I knew a guy that played Honky Tonk Man, who was a Nashville singer like the Honky Tonk Man, but then he played a Russian gimmick the next match. With the red mask and all that other kind of stuff. This wasn't Foley. Like, he wasn't hiding who he was to be the other gimmick. He portrayed the other gimmick like an actor. Like I don't know, like Charles. So let's say Charles Bronson of all people. Like all Brad Pitt. Portraying different things. Tom Hanks. He was portraying these three different characters. This would be like Tom Hanks being in Forrest Gump, The Toy, and with the one where he's lost on the island in the same movie.
Castaway.
Yes. Thank you, Allison. He didn't put a mask on. It just was, and you felt like he was different every time he came out. It wasn't just a costume change, but it was the way he performed. Like, whether it was Bang Bang or whatever, all the stuff he did. It just, Foley really did feel these characters. Like, I think if he could have come out at like number 10 as Santa Claus, and we wouldn't have like really known it was even Foley, because he would have lived it.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Super Beard.
The thing too about those characters, like you said, it wasn't just the mannerisms to the ring that were different. The movesets were different. The way he carried himself in the ring was different. The ring psychology was different. Like, he really went to town and portrayed three different characters. And even back then, trying to think kayfabe and at that time the Attitude Era was taking kayfabe and throwing it out with throwing the baby out with the bathwater. They didn't give a shit anymore. It was all real at that point. We showed you what we were doing and blah blah blah. Vince Russo, bastard. What you could have, like, for a kayfabe perspective, and I think the commentators kind of talk about this during the Rumble. They were like his split personalities. They were his DID form. Like, it was his multiple personalities coming out, and that's why everything was so different. And I think that, so it still kind of kept with kayfabe, even though it's the same guy. You're just like, oh, he's nuts, and somehow he was able to get 3 spots in the Rumble. But yeah, so I thought that was great, and I loved every second of it. And I kind of hope that this year we'd get, because Matt Cardona has copyrighted Zack Ryder. I was hoping that he would come out around number 6 or 7 in the Rumble as Zack Ryder with the music, and they'd get thrown out faster than the Santino Marella, freak out, run to the back, and then come back out as Matt Cardona ripping up the Zack Ryder gear, and then have a nice long run in the Rumble. That didn't happen. And I was okay with that, by the way, because I'm not a toxic fan who gets mad when my fantasy booking doesn't come true. But to see what Foley did was truly... I remember watching that. I was 16, and I'm watching that... before my 16th birthday, I was 15. And I remember watching that going, that is one of the best things I've ever seen in wrestling. It was just so cool.
All right. The next question. Everybody has talked ad nauseum about this, so I don't want to spend an extra long amount of time specifically about this one moment in his career. I'm just going to ask you guys a simple question. Is the Hell in a Cell bump the most impressive bump in pro wrestling? For what it was, what it is, has there been one since? Was there one before it? Do you think the Hell in a Cell bump is the most impressive bump in pro wrestling? And if it's not, can you think of one immediately that comes to mind that could be close to question or like challenging it?
I will say impressive, no. Terrifying and insane and awe-inspiring and memorizing, yes. Iconic, absolutely. Impressive, not in the slightest. When I think impressive bumps, I'll just go back to the Royal Rumble one more time. Logan Paul and Ricochet, what they did jumping across the ring, that was impressive. That was impressive. The Hell in a Cell bump was iconic, legendary, and fucking stupid.
Mr.
And
Mac?
the match sucked. Two, they bastardized it so much. Like, Rikishi falling off into a hay truck, like what, 3 years later? Like, it was embarrassing. Bump wise, New Jack throwing that dude off the scaffold, and I can't remember the name of the guy.
Vic Grimes.
Yeah, Vic Grimes. Dude, he took a hell of a bump. Now I know it wasn't planned, but he took
Kill him.
Yeah.
Legit kill him.
Yeah, like he took a hell of a bump and he survived. Foley's bump, yeah, visually was like amazing. The match sucked. Like again, like this is the match you put on. Like, it was terrible. And then how they tried to keep like playing it year after year with Foley going through. Obviously, there was cages then, that were rigged to have the ceilings fall or everything else. Like it just. It was like the Fandango day. It came off organically, and then WWE tried to make it their own, and they ruined it over time.
Al, what you think?
I like that match, Bobby. I think it was super cool. That match was one of when we started this whole shebang. That was literally, I think, the first match on your list for me of things to watch. So that match means a little bit more to me as far as like my personal wrestling journey. Shut the fuck up, Bobby. You're such an asshole.
And the people in the podcast, I don't know what she's talking about.
You're such a dick, man.
That's what she said.
You wish.
Yeah, I know. I did just say it. It doesn't work. Anywho, I mean, yeah, are there probably some more impressive bumps? I guess, I might say, like, the spear in the TLC2 match may have been, like, a more impressive bump.
That's a good call. That's a good call, Allison.
What, Bobby? You're actually, like, praising something I said? Will mark down.
I literally just marked it down as you were telling me I'm gonna, because that never happens.
Hey, post production, can we mute it?
All right, I'm clipping that.
Yeah, so there's definitely more impressive bumps, but at the time, I thought it was fucking cool. Yeah. So, fuck you, Bowie.
After he went through the cage, went off the cage, knocked it around, 3 faces of Foley, I'm going to cut it back just a second and bring up a short feud before we go into the title run. But the Chainsaw Charlie feud. Chainsaw Charlie and Cactus Jack held the tag titles, but Mankind and Terry Funk were feuding. I think that is genius writing. When you talk about goofy writing, Super Beard, I think that is genius. That one set is feuding, but then their alter egos are best friends and tag team champions. I always loved that storyline. January 4th, 1999, there was a match between Mankind and Corporate Rock. Lots of interference. Ken Shamrock comes in. Billy Gunn comes in and beats the shit out of him. The corporation is involved. Stone Cold's music hits.
Him respect.
What?
Daddy ass.
Daddy ass. He attacks Ken Shamrock. The corporation comes in. DX comes in. Stone Cold's music hits. He lays The Rock out with a chair. 1, 2, 3. Mick Foley wins the WWF Championship. We all know the Tony Schiavone, the famous, don't change the channel. They're about to put the belt on Mick Foley, whatever, like that'll put butts in seats, or, the famous Schiavone line. So we've got him to his first title run in 99. Super Beard, what did, the impression of what it meant to finally put the belt on Foley after he had been in the business for almost 20 years, and now he gets his first singles championship run. What did you think it meant at that point for McMahon to put the belt on Foley?
The day WCW died. I think, first off, it was not only a win for Mankind or Mick Foley or whoever, like the show, he's like, you know what, I finally made it. It was a win for Jim Ross. Because Vince, like I said, brought him in to fail, brought him in to make Jim Ross look bad. And here he is now, so over that they're like, yeah, we can put the title on him. He can carry the company. And so it was a big proving moment for Jim Ross, but I think for Mick Foley especially, it was validation of everything he has done. It was the goal. Every wrestler who gets in the business, that's their goal. I don't care if they end up becoming just a mid-card guy. When you start in a business, it's to win the world championship. And the celebration that came and the genuine emotion on his face told you it all, that he felt validated. He felt like he was seen. And, I mean, kudos to Vince McMahon for pulling the trigger. Because, I mean, it was also kind of unexpected. Because I don't think anybody going into that match thought he had a chance. And, you know, it was pre-recorded, but even then, I mean, we didn't live in the social media days we live now, so it wasn't really out there until Tony Schiavone, you know, gave up the script and, you know, killed his entire company. So yeah, I mean, it showed you know what it showed mostly is that he had earned the respect of the biggest name in business, Vince McMahon. He had proven his work ethic and proven his ability to work a crowd to the point where Vince McMahon said, "We're going to put the title on you, son." And that's a big deal.
Bobby, what do you think it means to put the belt on Mick Foley?
I think it meant a lot, especially for WWE as a company, WWF at that time, that they did this for a territory guy. Like, this was not, you know, if you look at territory guys, I wouldn't really classify a lot of champions before him as territory guys. Like, even Ric Flair at that point in time was already a made man when he won the belt. So, yeah, you know, they might have worked in territory wrestling, but they were not territory guys. You know, Randy Savage, you know, even Warrior. You know, to me, like, this was a big stepping stone for WWE. You know, I will say it wasn't Schiavone's fault. It wasn't him that killed the company. I'd say it was Bischoff, because Bischoff fed him the line. But to me, like, when Mick Foley won the belt that night, like, it leads me to Neil Armstrong, and it wasn't one small step for man. It's one giant leap for mankind, and that's what I think about when Mick Foley.
Cheesy as fuck, Bobby.
Thanks. That's what I think about, like, when Foley won that belt. And this was the most, and I know Super Beard said this earlier, F. Vince Russo. I'm very PG.
Since when?
Just because my daughter ever tunes in. But this was the most Russo finish of a match ever. Like, this was all, like, Vince Russo. Like, I don't care if anybody wants to discredit Vince Russo on anything. This had to be a Vince Russo finish, because you had more people from the locker room out there than you did at Briscoe's on stage memorial. Like, there were so many people out there. It was just so like infatuated with everybody. And Foley to pull out the Rocky line of Yo Adrian, like, you could tell it was pure emotion from Foley. It was pure emotion, and it was cool. Like, and I would say, again, not knowing that it was 100% Vince Russo, if it was, this was the greatest thing Vince Russo ever did, and probably the stupidest thing that Eric Bischoff ever did. And I think that the finger poke of doom was that night as well, if I'm not mistaken.
It was.
Yeah. So, yeah, WCW dug a grave that night and dug a hole that they could not get out of.
By the way, the reason I always blame Tony Schiavone for that is not because he said the line, it's the way he delivered it. Like, oh, that'll put butts in the seats. I'm not sure if Eric Bischoff fed him that part of the line, and he may have, but the pure disdain in his voice, that's all Tony. So I always blame Eric Bischoff, and he is to blame. Like, he'll always say he's not, and then by the end of the conversation, he always takes blame for ending WCW.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
You're good. I was rambling.
After he won the title, the 2000s, before he departed and went into the TNA, and then all the after effects, and then his returns and his not returns, and we kind of saw Foley kind of fade off into the distance. He went through the 2000s run. I don't want to take away too much from next week's episode, because we round out this trio of episodes by specifically covering that 2000 run with the Royal Rumble match between Cactus Jack and Triple H, going into the Hell in a Cell match, leading up to Foley getting his only main event at WrestleMania. But I don't want to gloss over this part of his career too much, though, because you unfortunately won't be here next week, Super Beard. What do you think about that trio of matches and what it meant for Foley's career at that point? Because at this point, he's multi-time hardcore champion, multi-time tag champion. He's been in every successful promotion in the world. He's held the world title a few times. He's had the banger matches with The Rock and the I Quit and the Empty Arena match. He's been off the top of every cage WWE has to throw at him. But now in the 2000s, he's kind of became that locker room general kind of person, that old guy that's giving the rub. He's helping put over young talent, the guys that are coming in, your Randy Ortons. Edge is getting ready to take off as a superstar. Triple H is getting ready to take off as a superstar. I don't know why I said Randy Orton in 2000, because Orton didn't come in until later. But you guys you kind of smelling what I'm stepping in with it, is that by the 2000s run, he was putting these younger guys over. Kind of keeping it short and sweet, Super Beard. What did you think about the 2000s run version of Mick Foley?
Well, to be honest, I look back at a lot of his career very fondly now. I was never a fan of his until that run, because that's when Mick Foley showed up.
Yeah.
And that's when I like, oh, he's the real deal. He's a genuine human being. He is a genuine guy, and he is putting on these bangers of matches that were hardcore but not over the top. Like, and that was my thing. I was like, as long as it's not over the top, I'm cool with it. And I think it redefined hardcore wrestling, and he redefined the careers, or pushed the careers of Edge and Randy Orton and Triple H and everybody else. And this is when I actually fell in love with him as a character and as a wrestler. And I've now since gone back and watched a lot of the other stuff. I'm like, oh, this actually is a lot better than I remember. And so I would say that it not only was he pushing new talent and putting them over, I think it garnered him a lot more fans, and it just cemented him as the legend that he truly is. Because those promos, like, forget the matches, all the promo work during those times, my God. And the stuff with him and Stephanie, jeez, man, just so good. So, he truly cemented himself as a Hall of Fame legend in that time period.
Bobby, what did you think about the 2000s run of the Foley?
Yeah, I agree. Like, I think, to me, I would equate this to Skinamax. Like, this is softcore Mick Foley. He's still doing all the stuff, but you don't see it as much. Like, he's talking you more in the seats. His stuff like Rock and Sock. I thought Rock and Sock was brilliant. Like, everything they did was just gold, and it wasn't just because Dwayne Johnson is the greatest actor in history. It's because Rock, the character, and Mick Foley, Mankind, took it to a new level, and they went out there not only to make us as fans love them, they went out there, I think, and genuinely trying to like pop each other and make each other smile. And what entertained them entertained us. So yeah, he was still doing the hardcore matches with, thumbtacks and fire and blah blah blah, but it wasn't every match. And again, that's why I say it's softcore. It's Skinamax. Like, this is the Mick Foley that I want to see more and more and more. And is there a OnlyFans that I could buy the extended versions of? Like this really, I think, was Mick Foley at his best, Mankind at his best, and I think this was truly his best WWE run.
All right, I got one more question for you, and this is a serious one. Super Beard, I'm going to have you start, then Bobby, and then Al will wrap us up. How in the hell did Mick Foley get a plain white sock as over as he fucking did? How did Socko change wrestling? It became synonymous. One, the mandible claw's already, like, it's the only wrestling move you can genuinely put yourself in as far as, like, a submission hold when he explains how he does it. And then when he did the hospital scene with Mr. McMahon and the Bubbles the Clown, and he introduced Socko with the hand puppet. And just, what do you guys think? How the hell did he get a gym sock over as well as he did?
It's simple. Goofy wrestling for life. It was so absurd that it worked. And he given that to somebody else, it doesn't work. There are only certain people who can pull it off. One of those is Santino Marella with the Cobra. And we've had how many great moments between the Cobra and Socko. Like, it's just because he's so creative and so good. And he listens. That segment that introduced Socko was a taped segment. The crowd popped hard. He's like, okay, all right, there's something there. And as Mankind became a goofier character, it worked. Because it was still kind of psychotic. It was almost like R-Truth and Little Jimmy. Like, it was this... Socko had a personality without saying a word. And so that's why it worked. He was very creative. He was very good at what he did. He was always underappreciated for his promo skills, and part of that proof is getting Socko over. In these, like the "This Is Your Life" with the Rock and Socko, the "This Is Your Life," which arguably went a little long, but what a great segment. And like, Socko again plays a part, and it's all it took was just understanding your role as now you're a goofy Mankind, and so why not have a little sidekick?
Yeah, Rick Steiner did that in the 80s with Alex, who was his hand puppet. He just had that drawn. One thing I give credit to Rick Steiner and both Mick Foley is I'm glad that my hand and my socks don't talk, because I'd be embarrassed really publicly about that kind of stuff. And like
emotional damage.
But yeah, Saturn got challenged with that with Moppy, and obviously Moppy and Saturn's career is a lot different than Foley and Socko's career, or even Rick Steiner and Alex. And I dare to say most people don't even know who Alex is with Rick Steiner, but dude, to get a sock over, like that's huge. Like, when you talk about Ric Flair could wrestle with a broomstick, Mick Foley got a character over with a broom. Like, this was his broomstick, and it wasn't having to go out there and perform a match. It was, he created Mr. Socko, and people know who Mr. Socko is. Like, he created Kermit the Frog. He created Mickey Mouse. Like, he created this other character that we don't believe. And, they've tried since with, what is it? The doll that
Lily.
Alexa. Yeah, Lily. Yeah. Like, they've tried, and it doesn't work. It just has not worked. But he did. He made it work. So to create something like that, it says a ton for him. I don't know if the writing team was part of that. I don't know if Russo was part of that. I'm pretty sure Cornette was not part of that. But whoever came up with it was absolutely brilliant. And the fact that it wouldn't have been as brilliant if they didn't have a performer like Mick Foley bringing it to life.
Al, you're wrapping her up tonight. Closing thoughts on Sako.
I think it is impressive that he got a sock over. He talks about in the WWE Hidden Treasure show, about like making up Sako. I forget the whole story, but he is the one that came up with the whole thing. And that there are different versions of Sako. There's
the Richie Posney versions, which were the TV versions, and then like the ones he hand drew for house shows and stuff. Yeah.
And don't forget the Hall of Fame where Sako wore a tuxedo.
Right.
Truth.
So I mean, I think it's the only thing that you can say is like it's so Mick Foley. You know what I mean? Like, that only Mick Foley could get a fucking sock over. You know what I mean? Like,
the guy who said that the one guy who they thought wouldn't get over ever was able to do something as silly as getting a plain white gym sock over.
That he kept in his pants. Like.
All right, so Allie, just in all fairness, we all keep a sock in our pants, especially at the beach.
On that note.
Oh,
On that one, sir.
Ay.
All right. Super Beard, I'm sad that you won't be here for the Triple H conversation because I'm curious to deep dive with you some on how those two guys played off of each other. But it's been a blast having you hang out and chat about some wrestling with us, man. This is the chance. Plug your stuff. Tell everybody what you got going on over at Geeks and Noobs. Put yourself over for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. One, I will be in the chat for that Triple H discussion for sure. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, you can find me at twitch.tv/thegeeksandnoobs or on YouTube at youtube.com/TGNnetworks. I'm also a part of the PWC. I'm on there pretty much 7 days a week at this point. I pretty much stream 7 days a week now. So you can also find me at twitch.tv/Panda Wrestling Company. Find me on TikTok at Super Beard. That's the easiest way to find me. My link tree has all the links you need. We've also got new merch up. I've got a Super Beard shirt now. We got TGN shirts. Friend of the show, Ginger Ninja, has more merch on my shop than I do. Partially my fault. I made him make a bucket hat as well as a tumbler. But yeah, so you can get all that there. The links are again all in my bio. You can find me there. So hit me up, and I'm all for talking. I talk not just wrestling. You know, the Geeks and Noobs is all about comic book movies and stuff like that. So we have a really big episode coming up this week on Thursdays. That's Thursday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking the Flash trailer. Also, Tuesday nights is Wrestling with Toxicity at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then, like I said, I'm all over the Panda Wrestling Company like 7 days a week. So.
Bobby Mack, pledge your stuff.
Yeah, you can always find me on Twitter where I will say stuff that you might not like, but hey, you know what? It brings a smile to your face, or at least my face, that you're commenting on it and say, hey, I don't like that. Twitch, you can find me on here, you can follow me on here, but you're not going to see a thing about me doing anything on here. And of course, my accounting page, which is on the Linktree account. So just go to my linktree.com. All this stuff is at Yellow Shoe Guy, and you can find the accounting. But most importantly, go to TikTok, because I will put up some old school, nude school, all kinds of school. Did I say nude or nude?
It sounded like you said nude school.
I think you
Okay,
said...
either one. Whatever TikTok will allow, I will go on there as well for Yellow Shoe Guy. It's not just pro wrestling. Sometimes we do some roller coaster stuff and some theme parks. Now that I'm back in Florida, we're going to be doing a lot more of that kind of stuff too. So follow me on TikTok. We're at 16.7 thousand followers right now, on our way to 100,000 followers. We go live. We try not to get banned.
29 days without either one of you getting banned.
Did you update the board for us?
Well, I did like 3 times, and then I erased it to write other things, and I never wrote it back. So, but 29 days without being banned.
I'm going to have to meet up with Bobby in Orlando and hit some theme park stuff, because I'm a huge theme park guy, too. So.
Are you in Orlando?
I'm just outside Orlando, Crystal River, so.
Oh, dude, yeah.
Bobby, you might actually get a friend.
Don't embarrass me, please. I like Super Beard.
That would be weird with my Meta Oculus. Like, I've never played with someone explosive.
Hey, don't forget Ninja's in Jacksonville, and he goes to Orlando all the time.
Really?
I'm gonna be so mad if you meet Superbeard and Jaxpo both before me.
Bro, I work at Andretti's, so just pop in anytime.
Shit, I ate there last time I was in Orlando.
Did you really?
Yes.
Oh shit, yeah, dude. I'm a manager at Andretti's.
Holy
No,
shit.
no putting over people or whatever.
No free shout-outs.
No free shout outs. Andretti go karting right outside of Topgolf.
Do you find yourself wanting to call it Andrades?
No,
Just because, like...
I don't even think of Andrade.
Just saying.
That was for you, Allison.
Sure, let's.
Allison, plug your stuff. Tell everybody you're gonna make a comic this week.
Fuck you, Will. Just for that, I'm gonna. You make the comic, you butthole. Anyways, you can find me on Tweeters and TikTok at justagirl918. I'm at 751 followers on TikTok. Only, how many is that? Only
149.
Thank you. To go. So please follow me on the TikTok so that I can go live. I'm gonna make a comic, yada yada. No, I think I'm gonna do one this week out of spite for it. Just completely out of spite. As the person that has a real job, I don't always have time to do...
That remark.
I don't always have time to do all of the extra things on top of all the second job that I have doing this podcast.
Fair enough.
But, no, I'll fucking make a comic this week. Fuck you, Will.
Yeah, my job is real. I just play.
I know, Bobby.
Bobby's got a real job.
But all Bobby has to do for these shows is show up.
Until next week when we get his going and then he actually has to host a show.
I have to look pretty.
Huh. If you like our... What?
Look pretty because I did not work on myself.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
If you like our intro music, check out _Hill Tactics. That's Jaylan on the beat on TikTok. He does all of our intros and outro music. If you want to follow my friends, follow Mr. B-Roll. Follow Game Changer Wrestling. Follow Self Bet Wrestling, Bree Stout. All the guys at Panda Wrestling Company. Follow the Creation World crew. That's Lord, Cuss-A-Lot, my boy Travis Pointer, MATTRIDDER, Matt Ritter at Smacking It Raw, Katie Wrestling 13, Pretty Kyle at Apron Bump. Follow Brian's House of Random. Follow all my friends. Super Beard, I love you, Bubba. Thanks for coming by. Yellow Shoe Guy, you're here because it's your job. Al, I appreciate you. But... now, as we close another episode of Botched and Chair Shots, I'll take a minute. Thank you for listening. Remind you to go wherever you do anything on the internet. Like, follow, subscribe, unsubscribe, then subscribe again. Leave a comment telling me how great I am or how terrible Bobby is. Either way, it helps the algorithm and it helps find new listeners. If you're feeling really generous and be one of the VIP people, head over to patreon.com and donate to the Rivet City Radio Podcast Network. You get some fantastic swag. We get some fantastic guests. It's a win-win. For the Super Beard, for the Yellow Shoe Guy, and for the Boss Bitch, I am the Will Gray. Thanks for stopping by and listening, my people.
Bye-bye.
And you are people.